Hey there, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I've put together a new collection of interesting stories, so whether you're here to relax, fall asleep, or just listen in the background, this should be a good one. Feel free to let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always interesting to see where everyone is tuning in from. Now, let's start with the first story. It is titled,
There's firewood and food for 2 weeks. I'm going to the Maldives with my boyfriend and I'll take all your savings, my wife said, leaving me in a snow-covered cabin 200 km from the city after my appendix surgery. She took my phone. Oh, I also changed the locks on your apartment, she shouted from the car window. I watched them drive away and smiled. She had no idea about the surprise waiting for her at the airport. The morphine was still singing in my veins when I heard the car engine start. I was lying on the narrow bed in the cabin's single bedroom, staring at the exposed wooden beams above me, counting the knots in the timber, because counting was easier than thinking about the incision in my abdomen that pulled tight every time I breathed. The surgery had been 3 days ago, emergency appendectomy. The kind where they tell you that if you'd waited another 6 hours, you'd be looking at sepsis, organ failure, a funeral with an open casket, and people saying things like, he was so young and such a tragedy. But I hadn't waited. Sarah had driven me to the hospital, her hands tight on the steering wheel. Her jaw set in that way that used to mean she was worried about me, but that I'd learned over the past 8 months meant something else entirely. Something harder. Something that looked like worry from the outside, but felt like calculation on the inside. The doctor had been a small woman with kind eyes and efficient hands. She'd explained the procedure while Sarah stood in the corner of the examination room, scrolling through her phone. The doctor had looked at Sarah, then at me, then back at Sarah, and I'd seen a flicker of something in her expression. Confusion, maybe, or recognition. The kind of recognition you get when you see a pattern you have seen before. You'll need complete rest for at least 2 weeks, the doctor had said, directing her words at me, but glancing at Sarah. No driving, no lifting anything heavier than a coffee cup. Someone will need to monitor you for signs of infection, fever, increased pain, redness around the incision. You'll be vulnerable. That word, vulnerable. Sarah had looked up from her phone then, and she'd smiled. Not at me, just smiled like she just read something pleasant in an email. Now I was hearing the car engine, and my hand reached automatically for my phone on the nightstand. Except my phone wasn't there. My phone hadn't been there since this morning when Sarah had brought me breakfast. Canned soup heated on the cabin's ancient propane stove served with 2 slices of white bread that tasted like cardboard and regret. You need to rest, she'd said, slipping my phone into her jacket pocket with a gesture so smooth it might have been practiced. No work emails, no stress, doctor's orders. I'd been too tired to argue, too full of painkillers and post-surgical fog to point out that the doctor had said nothing about phones. That rest didn't mean isolation. That there was a difference between healing and imprisonment. The cabin was my father's, or had been before he died. He'd bought it 30 years ago back when you could still get a piece of land in the mountains for the price of a used car. 200 kilometers from the city down a logging road that turned into a hiking trail that turned into a suggestion of a path that only people who knew the way could follow. No cell service, no internet, no neighbors within 10 kilometers, just forest and silence and the kind of solitude that was supposed to be healing, but felt in that moment like a grave. I heard footsteps on the porch. Sarah's boots on the wooden planks, then her voice calling through the closed bedroom door. I'm heading out now. I tried to sit up, the incision screamed. I made it onto my elbows, breathing through my teeth, tasting copper and bile. Sarah, there's firewood stacked by the stove, she continued, her voice bright and cheerful, like she was leaving instructions for a house sitter, not her husband who'd just had emergency surgery. Enough for 2 weeks if you are careful. And I stocked the pantry, canned goods, pasta, rice. There's a manual can opener in the drawer. Don't try to use the electric one. The generator is temperamental, and I don't want you messing with it. I got my legs over the side of the bed. The room tilted. I pressed my palm against the incision site, feeling the bandage beneath my shirt, feeling the heat of inflammation. Or maybe just the heat of my own body trying to knit itself back together. Sarah, wait. The door opened. She stood in the door frame, backlit by the pale winter light from the main room, her figure a dark silhouette. She'd cut her hair since the surgery. I noticed it for the first time. Shoulder length now, styled in that way that cost $200 at the salon downtown. She was wearing the coat I'd bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. The one she said was too expensive. The one she'd cried over before kissing me and saying I shouldn't have. I'm going to the Malds, she said. The words didn't make sense at first. They were sounds without meaning, like she'd suddenly started speaking a language I'd never learned. What? The Malds? You know, the islands, Indian Ocean. I've always wanted to go. White beaches, blue water, 5-star resorts, the kind of place where they put flowers on your pillow, and the champagne never stops flowing. I stared at her. The morphine was definitely wearing off now because the pain was becoming crisp and specific, and with it came a clarity that felt like ice water in my veins. You're going on vacation, I said slowly. While I'm recovering from surgery, alone in a cabin with no phone. I'm going with Marcus. Marcus. The name landed like a punch. Marcus from her office. Marcus who'd started 3 months ago. Marcus who Sarah had mentioned casually the way you mention a coworker. Someone who existed only in the context of budget meetings and water cooler conversations. Marcus, who was young and funny and good at his job and completely utterly irrelevant to our marriage. Except he wasn't irrelevant. That's what the smile meant. That's what the new haircut meant. That's what the brightness in her voice meant. That strange excited energy I hadn't seen directed at me in months, maybe years. Sarah. And I'm taking the money, she continued, speaking faster now, like she wanted to get it all before I could interrupt. The savings account, all of it, the one we've been building for the down payment on the house. Turns out we don't need a house. I don't need a house. I need a vacation. I need to remember what it feels like to be young and happy and not tied down to. She stopped. Didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Not tied down to me. You can't, I said. My voice sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from somewhere else, someone else. That's joint account. You can't just actually, I can. Already did this morning while you were sleeping. Transferred it all to my personal account. $48,000. Thank you for being such a diligent saver. By the way, Marcus says it's enough for first-class tickets, an overwater bungalow, and enough spending money to last us a month. She smiled again. God, that smile. It was the worst thing about all of this. Not the words, not the betrayal, the smile. Like she was proud of herself, like she'd just accomplished something difficult and praiseworthy, like running a marathon or getting a promotion. I'll file for divorce when I get back, she added almost as an afterthought. My lawyer says it's straightforward. No kids, no shared property except the apartment. And well, about that. She pulled something from her pocket. A key ring. Our apartment keys. She held them up so I could see them clearly in the light. I changed the locks, she said. This morning, same time as the bank transfer. You won't be able to get in. Your stuff is in storage. Unit 247 at public storage on Highway 9. I paid for 1 month. After that, if you don't pick it up, they'll auction it off. So, you might want to prioritize that when you get back to the city. She dropped the old keys on the floor. They hit the wooden planks with a sound like coins dropping into a well. Oh, and I took your phone because I didn't want you calling anyone to come get you. You need rest, remember? Doctor's orders. 2 weeks of complete rest. By the time you walk out of here and make it back to civilization, I'll be halfway through my vacation and the divorce papers will be filed and everything will be done. Clean, simple. I tried to stand, made it halfway up before the pain folded me back down onto the bed. I pressed both hands against my abdomen, feeling wetness, hoping it was sweat and not blood, not the incision tearing open. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Sarah tilted her head, considering the question like it was an interesting puzzle. Because I can, she said finally. Because I'm tired of being married to someone who works 60-hour weeks and then comes home too exhausted to talk. Because Marcus makes me laugh. Because I'm 34 years old and I refuse to waste another year of my life waiting for you to notice that I'm dying of boredom. Because the opportunity presented itself and I'm smart enough to take it. She turned toward the door, then paused, looking back over her shoulder. Firewood by the stove, she repeated. Food in the pantry. 2 weeks, you'll survive. You always do. That's your problem, actually. You're a survivor. You'll adapt. You'll figure it out. You'll be fine, Sarah. But she was already walking away. I heard her boots on the porch, heard the stairs creak, heard her footsteps on the gravel path that led to where she'd parked the car. My car, actually, the SUV I'd bought specifically for trips like this, for driving on rough mountain roads. I made it to the window, had to lean against the wall, had to breathe through the pain, but I made it. Watched through the frost rime glass as she threw her suitcase into the back seat. A large suitcase, the expensive one, packed for a long trip. Marcus was in the passenger seat. I could see him through the windshield. Young, like she'd said. Dark hair, good jawline. He was looking at his phone, scrolling, completely at ease. Sarah climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine. The SUV's heads cut through the early winter afternoon, making the snow on the ground sparkle like diamonds. She rolled down the window, leaned out. "Oh, I also changed the locks on your apartment," she shouted, her voice carrying across the clearing, echoing off the trees. "I already told you that, right? Just making sure you heard me." She was laughing, actually laughing. I watched them drive away. Watched the SUV navigate the narrow path. Watched it disappear around the bend where the forest got thick. Watched until I couldn't see it anymore. Until there was nothing left but tire tracks in the snow and the sound of the engine fading into silence. And then I smiled. I smiled because Sarah had made a mistake. Several mistakes, actually. But one big one that she'd been too busy planning her betrayal to notice. She'd forgotten about the cabin's landline. My father had installed it 20 years ago, back when he'd first bought the place. A single phone line running underground along the same trench as the power line connecting to the junction box 5 kilometers down the mountain. It didn't work with cell phones, couldn't text, couldn't access the internet, but it could make calls. Old-fashioned voice-only copper wire calls. The phone was in the kitchen, mounted on the wall next to the ancient refrigerator, its curly cord hanging down like a question mark. Sarah had taken my cell phone, but she didn't know about the landline. She'd never asked about it, never thought to look for it. She'd been here twice before, once when we'd first started dating, once for a weekend getaway 3 years ago. And both times she'd complained about the lack of cell service. Had spent the entire visit anxious and disconnected, desperate to get back to civilization. She'd never noticed the landline, had never thought to wonder how my father had managed to live out here for weeks at a time without going completely mad from isolation. I made my way to the kitchen. It took 5 minutes to cross 20 feet. Every step was a negotiation with pain, but I made it. Lifted the receiver, heard the dial tone, beautiful and clear and unexpected as a miracle. I dialed a number from memory, waited through 3 rings. "Hello, Tom," I said. "It's Daniel." Tom, my business partner, my best friend since college, the person who stood next to me at my wedding and told me I was making a mistake even as he handed me the ring. "Jesus Christ, where are you? I've been trying to call you for 3 days. Your phone goes straight to voicemail. Long story. Listen, I need you to do something for me." "Anything? What's going on?" "You sound I need you to make a call right now." "Are you near your computer?" "Yeah, I'm at the office." "What?" "Airport Security International Terminal. There's a flight to the Maldives leaving tonight. 7:30 p.m. I need you to call them and report that 2 passengers on that flight are traveling with a stolen credit card." Silence on the other end. "Then what the is happening?" "Sarah cleaned out our savings account this morning. $48,000. She's flying to the Maldives with her boyfriend. She left me alone in the mountain cabin to recover from surgery. No phone, no way out." Another silence, longer this time. When Tom spoke again, his voice had changed, gotten colder, harder. "What do you need me to do?" I told him. All of it. The whole plan that had been forming in my head since the moment I'd heard that engine start. Since the moment I'd realized what Sarah was doing, the plan I'd been building for months, actually, since the first time I'd seen her phone light up with a text message from Marcus and watched her smile, that secret smile. I'd known, some part of me had known for a long time, and some other part of me, the part that had learned through years of building a business from nothing, that the best defense is preparation, had been getting ready. When I finished talking, Tom was quiet for a moment, then he laughed. Not a happy laugh, a sharp, fierce laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "You beautiful, paranoid bastard," he said. "You actually planned for this." "I planned for something like this," I corrected. "I hoped I was wrong, but I prepared anyway." "Consider it done," Tom said. "I'll make the call right now." "And Daniel, yeah, don't move around too much. You just had surgery. I'll send someone to get you tomorrow morning." "Thank you." "Thank me later. Right now, I need to go ruin your wife's vacation." He hung up. I set the receiver back in its cradle and stood there in the kitchen, breathing carefully, feeling the pain in my abdomen settle from acute to chronic, from emergency to endurance. Outside, the snow was starting to fall again. Fat flakes drifting down through the trees covering the tire tracks, erasing the evidence of Sarah's departure. I smiled again, wider this time. She had no idea what was waiting for her at the airport, but she was about to find out. The pain woke me at 3 o'clock in the morning. Not the incision, though that was singing its own sharp song, but a different kind of pain. The kind that lives in your chest right behind your sternum, pressing outward like something trying to escape. Grief maybe, or rage, or that particular species of hurt that comes from realizing the person you trusted most in the world had been planning your destruction with the same careful attention most people reserve for birthday parties. I lay in the darkness listening to the cabin settle around me. The wind had picked up, driving snow against the windows with a sound like sand. The wood stove in the main room was still radiating heat. I'd loaded it before sleeping. Muscle memory from childhood visits to this place. But I could feel the cold creeping in at the edges, testing the walls, looking for weaknesses, like Sarah had been doing for months. How long had she been planning this? That was the question that kept circling through my head like a vulture. How long had she been sitting across from me at breakfast, kissing me goodbye at the door, lying next to me in bed at night, all while constructing the elaborate machinery of my abandonment? I thought about the timeline, tried to piece it together from the evidence scattered across the past year like crime scene markers. Marcus had started at her company 3 months ago, but the distance between us had started long before that. Maybe a year ago, maybe longer. There had been a subtle at first, easy to dismiss as the normal entropy of marriage. She'd stopped asking about my day, stopped telling me about hers, stopped initiating sex, then stopped responding to my initiations with anything but passive accommodation. The kind of obligation you fulfill with the same enthusiasm you bring to paying taxes. I told myself it was stress. Her job was demanding. Marketing director for a mid-sized tech firm. The kind of position where you're always one quarterly report away from either promotion or termination. I told myself we were in a rough patch, that all marriages go through them, that we just needed to reconnect, maybe take a vacation, maybe go to cruise therapy. I'd actually suggested therapy 6 months ago over dinner at the Italian place she loved, the one with the truffle pasta that cost $38 a plate. She'd looked at me like I'd suggested we join a cult. Therapy? She'd said, her fork paused halfway to her mouth. Why would we need therapy? I just think we could use some help communicating. I communicate fine. You're the one who's always buried in work. And that had been the end of that conversation. Looking back now, I could see it clearly. The deflection, the accusation of the way she'd turned my concern into evidence of my failure. How many other moments had been like that? How many times had I tried to reach across the growing distance between us only to be told the distance was my fault, my creation, my responsibility to fix? I thought about the savings account. $48,000. We'd been building it for 5 years, adding to it slowly, consistently. 500 here, there. Whatever we could spare after rent and bills and the cost of living in a city where a decent apartment costs more per month than my parents' first house. We were going to buy a place. That was the plan. Something small. Maybe a condo. Maybe a fixer-upper in an up-and-coming neighborhood. Our own space, a foundation for the future. But Sarah had a different plan. Sarah had been watching that number grow. 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 and seeing something else entirely. Not a future, an escape route. I wondered when she'd decided, when she'd looked at that balance and thought, this is enough. Enough to leave. Enough to start over. Enough to fund a fantasy life with a man who wasn't tired, wasn't boring, wasn't me. The worst part was how smart she'd been about it. How carefully she'd orchestrated everything. The appendicitis had been real. You can't fake that. Can't manufacture the kind of pain that had doubled me over in the kitchen 5 days ago. Can't simulate the fever in the elevated white blood cell count that had sent the emergency room doctor running for the surgical team. But Sarah had seen an opportunity in my emergency. Had recognized that a man recovering from surgery is vulnerable, dependent, easy to isolate, had probably been waiting for something like this, some moment when she could act without fear of immediate consequences. The cabin had been her idea. The morning after the surgery, while I was still groggy from anesthesia, she'd sat by my hospital bed and stroked my hair and suggested so gently that maybe I should recover somewhere quiet, somewhere peaceful, away from the stress of the city. Your dad's cabin, she'd said. Remember how peaceful it is? You could really rest there. No work distractions, no noise, just you in the forest in time to heal. I'd been grateful. Genuinely, stupidly grateful. I'd thought she was taking care of me, thought she was being the partner I'd always believed she was. The doctor had been skeptical. I remembered that now, lying in the darkness. The doctor had frowned when Sarah explained the plan, had asked pointed questions about accessibility, about how far we'd be from medical care if something went wrong. About whether I'd have help if I needed it. I'll stay with him for the first few days, Sarah had said smoothly. Make sure he's settled. Then my sister will come up and take over. A lie. Sarah's sister lived in Portland, and they hadn't spoken in 2 years. Not since a fight over their mother's estate that had ended with lawyers and restraining orders. But the doctor hadn't known that. The doctor had reluctantly agreed, had given Sarah a list of warning signs to watch for, had made Sarah promise to bring me back immediately if anything seemed wrong. Sarah had promised, had smiled and nodded and taken the list and probably thrown it away the moment we left the hospital. We'd driven up here 3 days ago. Sarah had helped me into the cabin, had settled me in bed, had brought me soup and water and pain pills. Model caretaker, devoted wife, the kind of person who'd never abandoned an injured man in a remote location with no way to call for help. She'd stayed 2 days, sleeping in the main room on the couch, bringing me meals, checking my incision, asking how I felt, playing the role, waiting. Waiting for what? For Marcus to finish preparing, for the plane tickets to be purchased, for the money to clear from one account to another, or maybe just waiting for me to be weak enough that I couldn't stop her, couldn't follow, couldn't fight back. The rage flared again, hot and bright in my chest. I pressed my hand against the incision, feeling the bandage, feeling the heat. The doctor had said to watch for signs of infection, increased pain, redness, fever. I didn't have a fever. I had fury. I forced myself to breathe slowly, evenly. To let the anger cool from a flash fire to a steady burn. Anger was useful. Anger could motivate, but rage made you stupid, made you impulsive, made you miss details. And details were everything. I thought about Tom's phone call, tried to imagine what was happening right now, 200 kilometers away in the city. Tom would have called the airport like I'd asked, would have reported the suspicious activity on a credit card. Would have mentioned the Malds flight, the departure time, the names. Airport security doesn't take those calls lightly. Not anymore. So, not in a world where everyone is one threat assessment away from suspicion. They'd pull Sarah and Marcus aside, take them to a private room, ask questions, check ID, run the credit card numbers through their systems, and that's where things would get interesting because the credit card Tom reported wasn't stolen. It was mine. A business card, technically, the one I used for company expenses with a $50,000 limit. The card was in my wallet, which was in my bag, which was here in the cabin with me. But I'd also 6 months ago ordered a duplicate card, had it sent to Tom's address. Had told him to keep it somewhere safe just in case. Just in case of what, Tom had asked. Just in case I need backup, I'd said. Just in case something goes wrong and I need someone I can trust to access funds quickly. Tom had looked at me strangely, had asked if everything was okay with Sarah, had offered to take me out for a drink and talk. I declined, told him I was probably being paranoid, told him to forget about it, but Tom hadn't forgotten. Tom had kept the card. And when I'd called him tonight and told him what I needed, he'd understood immediately. The credit card report was just the beginning. Just the opening move. Sarah and Marcus would be delayed, questioned, stressed. They'd miss their flight. Their perfect romantic escape would start with security officers and bright fluorescent lights and the creeping awareness that something had gone very wrong. But that wasn't the surprise I'd mentioned. That was just an inconvenience, a preview. The real surprise was waiting in the Malds. I'd booked a trip to the Malds 3 months ago, had seen the charges on Sarah's credit card. Her personal card, the one she thought I didn't have access to, and had felt my stomach drop, had logged into her email while she was in the shower, had seen the confirmation, 2 tickets, Overwater Bungalow, 5-star resort. She'd booked it in her name, and Marcus's name. Had used her personal card. Had probably planned to tell me it was a work trip or a girl's getaway or nothing at all because by the time she left I'd be too isolated to know. But I'd known and I'd acted. I'd called the resort, had explained that there was a mistake with the booking, had provided Sarah's confirmation number, easy enough to get from her email, and had made a small change to the reservation. I need to add one more guest to the party, I'd said. My business partner will be joining us. Could you update the booking to reflect 3 guests instead of 2? Same bungalow. I'll cover the additional cost. The resort had been accommodating. Why wouldn't they be? I was offering to pay more money. They'd updated the reservation, had sent a new confirmation to Sarah's email. Sarah had probably seen it, had probably panicked for a moment, seeing an unexpected change, but then she would have checked the details and seen that the dates were still correct. The bungalow was still correct. Everything was still on track. She wouldn't have noticed the 3rd name on the reservation. Or if she had, she would have assumed it was a glitch, a typo, an error that would be sorted out at check-in, but it wasn't an error. The 3rd name was Tom. Tom, who was supposed to fly out tomorrow, who had a ticket on the same airline, the same route, arriving at the same resort 12 hours after Sarah and Marcus, who had explicit instructions to check in, locate their bungalow, and make himself comfortable in the living area until they returned from wherever they were. I imagined the scene. Sarah and Marcus returning from a romantic dinner, holding hands, drunk on champagne, and the intoxication of new love, opening the door to their private paradise. Finding Tom sitting on their couch, reading a book, looking up with mild surprise. "Oh, hi Sarah," Tom would say. "Funny seeing you here. Daniel asked me to deliver something to you. Do you have a minute?" What would she do? Scream, run, try to call hotel security and explain that there was an unexpected guest in her bungalow. A guest whose name was on the reservation who had every legal right to be there. The fantasy was delicious, almost worth the pain in my abdomen. But even that wasn't the real surprise. The real surprise was what Tom would deliver. A folder. A simple manila folder containing documents, printouts, evidence. I'd been collecting it for 3 months, ever since I'd first suspected. Screenshots of text messages between Sarah and Marcus, easy enough to get when I had access to our shared cloud backup. Credit card statements showing dinners for 2 at expensive restaurants on nights when Sarah told me she was working late. Hotel receipts. Uber rides to Marcus's apartment building at midnight. A private investigator's report. I'd hired her 2 months ago after the therapy conversation, after I'd stopped believing Sarah's explanations. The investigator had been thorough. Photos, timestamps, a detailed log of Sarah's movements and financial records, all the documentation of our joint savings account, the transaction history, the transfer Sarah had made this morning, moving $48,000 from joint to personal. The transfer was legal. Technically, she had every right to withdraw money from a joint account, but it looked bad. Would look worse to a divorce lawyer, would look even worse to a judge when paired with evidence of adultery, abandonment of an injured spouse, and a pattern of financial deception. I documented everything, had built a case the way I'd been trained to build business proposals with facts, evidence, a clear narrative arc that led to an inevitable conclusion. The conclusion was simple. Sarah had destroyed our marriage, had done so deliberately, methodically with calculation and malice. And when the divorce proceedings started, when they inevitably started because Sarah had already said she'd file, I would have ammunition. I would have proof. I'd have more than that. I'd have leverage because Sarah didn't know about the business. Didn't know that the company Tom and I had started 7 years ago, the software consulting firm that had been barely profitable for the first 5 years, had exploded in the past 18 months, didn't know that we'd landed 3 major contracts in the past year, that our client list now included Fortune 500 companies, that our annual revenue had gone from $200,000 to almost $3 million. Sarah thought I worked too much for too little money. Thought I was grinding away at a startup that would probably fail, that would never provide the lifestyle she wanted, the security she deserved. She had no idea that I was weeks away from selling the company, that Tom and I had been in negotiations with a larger firm that wanted to acquire us, that the deal, when it closed, would net me personally over $2 million. She'd left me, had taken $48,000, and thought she'd won. She had no idea what she'd lost. I lay in the darkness, smiling at the ceiling, feeling the pain in my abdomen settle into something almost comfortable, something I could live with. Outside, the wind was dying down. The snow had stopped. In a few hours, dawn would break over the mountains, and Tom would send someone to collect me, probably arriving in a helicopter, knowing Tom's sense of drama, and I'd leave this place. I'd walk out of this cabin not as a victim, but as something else, someone else. Sarah had tried to break me, had tried to leave me wounded and isolated and helpless. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd forgotten that I'd been poor before I'd been comfortable. That I'd grown up in a house where money was something you fought for, where security was a dream, where survival meant being smarter and tougher and more prepared than everyone else. She'd forgotten that I knew how to fight. Or maybe she'd never known at all. Maybe that was the real betrayal. Not the affair, not the stolen money, not even the abandonment. Maybe it was that Sarah had never really known me. Had looked at me for 7 years and seen only what she wanted to see, a convenient partner, a reliable income, a placeholder for the life she actually wanted. She'd married a version of me that existed only in her imagination. And when reality didn't match the fantasy, she decided to trade me in for a newer model. But reality was about to catch on up with her. Was probably catching up with her right now in an airport security office while a stern-faced officer asked uncomfortable questions. I closed my eyes, let myself drift. Tomorrow would come soon enough. Tomorrow, I'd start the next phase. Tomorrow, I'd begin the long, careful work of taking back everything Sarah had tried to steal. But tonight, in the darkness, in the pain, in the cold mountain silence, I let myself feel something close to peace. Justice wasn't revenge. It was something cleaner, something more precise. Justice was truth. Justice was consequences. Justice was making sure that people who hurt you didn't get to walk away whistling. Sarah wanted a clean break, a simple divorce, a fresh start with someone new. She was going to get something very different. Dawn came slowly to the mountains, bleeding pale light through the frost-covered windows like watercolor on wet paper. I'd slept in fragments. 20 minutes here, an hour there, consciousness surfacing and diving like something learning to swim. Every time I woke, there was a moment of confusion. That strange disorientation where your brain hasn't caught up to your circumstances and then memory would flood back cold and complete. Sarah, Marcus, the mouths, the money, the locked apartment, the keys on the floor, the abandonment. And I made myself get up when the light was strong enough to see by. Made myself swing my legs over the edge of the bed. Made myself stand despite the incision pulling tight despite the wave of nausea that came with vertical movement. The painkillers were wearing off. I'd taken the last dose at midnight and the bottle was empty now, sitting on the nightstand like a taunt. 2 weeks worth of medication, the pharmacy label had said, but Sarah had only left me 4 days worth. Had probably checked the dosage, done the math, realized that running out of pain medication would make my situation more desperate. More miserable, more punishment. I shuffled to the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror above the sink. The face that looked back was a stranger's face, pale, drawn with dark circles under the eyes and 3 days of stubble making shadows on the jaw. I looked like someone recovering from trauma, which I supposed I was. The incision was angry looking when I peeled back the bandage. Red around the edges, hot to the touch, but not weeping, not infected, just healing the way surgical wounds heal with pain and tenderness and the slow knitting of tissue that's been cut apart. I'd been cut apart in other ways, too. Ways that wouldn't show on an X-ray. The cabin was cold. The wood stove had burned down to embers overnight. I added logs from the stack Sarah had mentioned. She hadn't lied about that, at least. There was plenty of firewood, neatly split and stacked under the eaves of the porch. I coaxed the embers back to flame, fed them kindling, watched the fire catch and grow. Fire is hungry. Fire is honest. Fire doesn't pretend to be something it's not. I thought about making coffee, but the propane-powered percolator seemed too complicated for my current state. Instead, I ate a can of peaches, standing at the kitchen counter, spooning the sweet fruit into my mouth and drinking the syrup straight from the can like I was 12 years old again, alone in this cabin with my father, learning how to be self-sufficient. My father had bought this place the year after my mother died, had told me it was important to have somewhere to go when the world got too loud, too demanding, too full of people who wanted things from you. He'd bring me up here for weeks at a time during summer vacations. We'd fish in the stream, hike the trails, split wood, fix whatever needed fixing. He taught me how to start a fire, how to read weather patterns in the clouds, how to be comfortable with silence. A man needs a place where he can think, he told me once, standing on the porch at sunset, watching the light turn the mountains purple. Somewhere nobody can reach him. Somewhere he can hear himself. I'd been 16, had thought he was being melodramatic, had been eager to get back to the city, to my friends, to the noise and distraction of adolescence. Now I understood what he'd meant. This place wasn't a prison. Sarah had meant it as when, but she'd miscalculated. This place was a fortress, a sanctuary, a space where I could think without interference, without Sarah's presence contaminating my thoughts, without the constant performance of pretending everything was fine. I finished the peaches, washed the can in the sink, looked out the window at the forest, at the snow covering everything like a clean slate. My phone was gone. My car was gone. My wife was gone. My apartment was locked against me. My savings were stolen. By any reasonable measure, I was, but I didn't feel I felt clear. The landline phone on the kitchen wall looked the same as it had when I was a kid. Avocado green, a rotary dial, the kind of phone that weighs 5 pounds and could probably survive a nuclear blast. I picked up the receiver, heard the dial tone, and felt something close to affection for the outdated technology. I called Tom's cell. He answered on the first ring. "Jesus Christ, you were up early," he said. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been stabbed in the abdomen and abandoned in the woods." So accurate. "Listen, I made that call last night. Airport security gave them all the information you wanted and they pulled Sarah and Marcus aside, held them for 2 hours, missed their flight." I closed my eyes, felt satisfaction roll through me like a drug. "Tell me everything." Tom's voice took on that particular quality it got when he was relaying gossip. Bright, engaged, enjoying the story. "I have a friend who works for TSA. Called in a favor, got the details. Security flagged them at the gate, took them to a private screening room, ran their IDs, checked their luggage, asked a lot of uncomfortable questions about the credit card charges." What did Sarah say? According to my source, she was furious, demanded to speak to a supervisor, claimed it was a mistake, that someone was harassing her, that she'd never stolen anything in her life. Marcus was quieter, looked nervous, kept checking his phone. They let them go. Eventually, no evidence of actual fraud. The card you had me report wasn't used for the tickets, so there was nothing to hold them on. But they missed the 7:30 flight. Next one doesn't leave until tonight. They're stuck at the airport for another 10 hours. I smiled at the wall. Good. There's more. While they were being questioned, someone, and I'm not saying it was me, but someone who might have had access to your email passwords, sent a message to Sarah's boss. My hand tightened on the receiver. Tom, what did you do? Nothing illegal. Just forwarded some information. Those credit card statements you collected, the ones showing all those expensive dinners and hotel stays. Turns out Marcus has been charging them to his corporate card. Company policy violation, potential embezzlement. Jesus. Sarah's boss was apparently very interested to learn that his marketing director has been having an affair with a junior employee. And that said, junior employee has been stealing from the company to fund said affair. I imagine there will be some very uncomfortable conversations when Sarah gets back from vacation. If she still has a job, I should have felt guilty. Should have felt like I'd gone too far, crossed a line, turned justified defense into malicious attack. I didn't feel guilty. I felt vindicated. The helicopter will be there in 2 hours, Tom continued. I hired a medical transport service. They'll bring a nurse just in case. They'll take you straight to my place. You can recover there. Tom, don't argue. You just had surgery. You need someone to look after you. And besides, we have work to do. The acquisition deal is closing in 10 days. We need to start prepping the acquisition. I'd almost forgotten about it. Lost in the drama of personal betrayal. But Tom was right. The deal was happening. The papers were being drawn up. The money was real. $2.3 million. My share of the sale. Money that would arrive in my account 2 weeks from now. Money Sarah would never touch. I'll see you soon. I said 2 hours. Don't do anything stupid in the meantime. Don't try to chop wood or hunt bears or whatever mountain man nonsense you're considering. Just rest. I'll rest. Liar. I know you. You're already planning your next move. He hung up before I could deny it. I stood in the kitchen, receiver in hand, listening to the dial tone. He was right. I was planning. Couldn't stop planning. My brain had shifted into that mode it got when I was working on a difficult problem. Analytical, focused, breaking everything down into component parts and potential solutions. Sarah thought she'd won. Thought she'd executed a perfect escape. But she'd left so many loose ends, so many assumptions, so many vulnerabilities. She'd assumed I was helpless without my phone, but there was the landline. She'd assumed I was trapped without a car, but there were helicopters, there were friends, there were a dozen ways to get out of the mountains if you had resources and connections. She'd assumed I'd be too weak to fight back, but pain is just data. Discomfort is just information your body is sending. You can acknowledge it and keep moving. Most of all, she'd assumed I'd be devastated, broken, destroyed by her betrayal. And maybe part of me was. Maybe there was a version of me that was curled up somewhere in my psyche, weeping over the death of a marriage, mourning the loss of the future we'd planned together. But that version wasn't in control right now. Right now, I was someone else, someone colder, someone who'd learned in the crucible of building a business from nothing that success belongs to people who can compartmentalize, who can put emotion in a box, close the lid, and focus on strategy. I'd loved Sarah. Past tense. Loved her laugh. Loved her ambition. Loved the way she looked at me in the early days. Like I was someone worth believing in. But love isn't unconditional. Love requires reciprocity. Love requires basic human decency. Sarah had abandoned that decency somewhere between booking tickets to the Malds and changing the locks on our apartment. I walked through the cabin taking inventory. The pantry was stocked, like she'd said. Canned goods, pasta, rice, beans, enough food for 2 weeks if you didn't mind eating like you were preparing for the apocalypse. The propane tank for the stove was 3/4 full. The generator in the shed outside had fuel. The wood pile would last through a month of winter if necessary. She prepared the cabin for a lengthy imprisonment. Had thought of everything practical, everything physical. But she hadn't thought about what would happen inside my head during those 2 weeks. Hadn't considered that isolation might give me clarity instead of despair. That silence might sharpen my thinking instead of dulling it. She'd given me a gift, actually. Time, space, the opportunity to plan without distraction. I found a notebook in one of the drawers, one of my father's old journals, half filled with his careful handwriting, notes about repairs needed, observations about wildlife, the occasional philosophical rambling. I flipped to a blank page and started writing, a list, a strategy, a road map, immediate priorities, medical care. Let Tom's nurse check the incision, get more pain medication, secure temporary housing. Tom's place for now. Find a short-term rental after that. Access my storage unit. Recover my belongings before the 1 deadline. Document everything. Photos of the locked apartment. Screenshots of the bank account transfers. Timeline of events. Short-term goals. Win torn 2 weeks. Consult with a divorce attorney. Not just any attorney. The best. Someone who specializes in high-asset divorces. Someone who plays to win. Freeze the joint credit cards. Report the unauthorized transfer. Explore options for recovery. Secure the business assets. Make sure Sarah has no claim on the company or the pending sale. Change all passwords. Email, banking, social media. Cut off her access to anything shared. Medium-term objectives. 1 to 3 months. File for divorce on grounds of abandonment and adultery. Beat her to the courthouse. Pursue financial remedies. Sue for return of the stolen savings. Seek compensatory damages. Cooperate with her employer's investigation into Marcus. Provide evidence if requested. Close the acquisition deal. Get paid. Move the money into accounts she can't touch. Long-term vision. Rebuild. New apartment. New life. New relationships built on honesty instead of performance. Ensure Sarah faces appropriate consequences. Not revenge. Justice. Move forward. Let go of the anger when it stops being useful. Never ever be this vulnerable again. I stared at the list. It looked clinical, emotionless, like a business plan for destroying someone's life. But it wasn't destruction. It was self-preservation. It was making sure that the person who'd hurt me didn't get to profit from that hurt. There's a difference between revenge and consequences. Revenge is about making someone suffer because you're suffering. Consequences are about making sure actions have appropriate outcomes. Sarah had acted. Now she'd face outcomes. I heard something outside. A distant sound growing louder. The rhythmic thump of rotor blades cutting air. The helicopter. I closed the notebook. Left it on the kitchen table. Made my way to the front door, moving slowly, carefully, mindful of the incision. Opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The sky was clear now, that bright winter blue that only happens in the mountains. The helicopter appeared over the tree in, red and white, medical markings on the side. It circled once, found a flat spot in the clearing, descended in a storm of blown snow. The rotor slowed, a door opened. 2 people climbed out, a pilot and a woman in medical scrubs carrying a bag. They ducked under the still spinning blades and jogged toward the cabin. The nurse was young, efficient looking with the kind of competent energy that made you trust her immediately. She introduced herself as Rachel, asked me how I was feeling, started assessing me before we had even made it back inside. "Let's see that incision," she said, guiding me to sit on the couch while she pulled on gloves. I lifted my shirt. She peeled back the bandage with practiced gentleness. Studied the wound with a critical eye. "It looks good," she said after a moment. "No signs of infection. You've been taking care of it properly." "I had a good teacher," I said, thinking of my father. Of all those summers learning first aid, learning self-sufficiency. She cleaned the wound, applied a fresh bandage, gave me a bottle of pain medication from her bag. "These are stronger than what you were prescribed. Take one every 6 hours. They'll help with the flight. Helicopter rides can be rough on recent surgical patients." "Thank you." She packed up her supplies, studied my face with an expression that suggested she saw more than just a surgical patient. "Your friend Tom told me what happened," she said quietly. "Your wife, I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say to that. Wasn't sure if I wanted sympathy or if sympathy felt like weakness." "I'm managing," I said finally. "You're doing more than managing. You're standing upright 3 days after major abdominal surgery. That takes strength." She shouldered her bag. "You ready to get out of here?" I looked around the cabin one last time. At the wood stove crackling with fire, at the simple furniture my father had chosen. At the windows framing views of forest and snow and mountains that had stood here long before my problems and would stand here long after they were resolved. Sarah had meant this place to be my prison. Instead, it had been the room where I'd found my spine again. "Yeah," I said. "I'm ready." We walked out into the cold morning air. The pilot was doing pre-flight checks, moving around the helicopter with practiced efficiency. Rachel helped me into the passenger compartment, buckled me in, handed me a headset. The rotor spun up. The engine roared. Mishara. The ground dropped away beneath us. I watched the cabin shrink below us. Watched it disappear into the forest. Watched the mountains spread out in every direction, vast and indifferent and beautiful. Somewhere out there, 200 kilometers away, Sarah was stuck in an airport. Tired, frustrated, probably fighting with Marcus, probably wondering what had gone wrong with her perfect plan. She'd find out soon enough. The helicopter banked east toward the city, toward whatever came next. I closed my eyes and let the medication Rachel had given me start to work. Let the pain fade to background noise. When I opened them again, we'd be somewhere else. Someone else. The broken husband was dying in that cabin. Someone harder was being born. Tom's apartment occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse in the arts district. All exposed brick and steel beams and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city like you owned it, which in a sense Tom did or would once the acquisition closed and the money hit our accounts. The helicopter had landed on the roof of a private medical building downtown. From there, an ambulance, Tom's idea, his insistence on doing everything by the book, had transported me to his place. Overkill. Probably I could have taken a car, but Rachel, the nurse, had sided with Tom, had said something about liability and post-operative protocols, and I'd been too tired to argue. Now, I was installed in Tom's guest room, which was nicer than any bedroom I'd ever slept in. King-size bed with sheets that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Blackout curtains, a bathroom with heated floors, and a shower that had more settings than my laptop. Tom appeared in the doorway holding a mug of something that smelled like expensive coffee and looked like it had been made by someone who understood the chemistry of extraction. "You look like death," he said cheerfully, handing me the mug. "I feel like death's probationary employee." I sipped the coffee. It was perfect. Everything in Tom's life was perfect, which should have been annoying, but somehow wasn't. Tom had earned his perfection through talent and relentless work and a complete inability to settle for adequate. He settled into the armchair by the window, studied me with the same analytical expression he used when reviewing code or evaluating business proposals. So he said, Sarah, want to talk about it?" "Not particularly. Want to destroy her financially and emotionally while maintaining plausible deniability and staying on the right side of the law." I smiled despite myself. "That's why we're friends." Tom pulled out his phone, swiped through screens. "I've been busy while you were communing with nature, made some calls, gathered some intelligence. You want the good news or the interesting news first? There's a difference. The good news is straightforward victory. The interesting news is complicated victory with potential for collateral damage." I leaned back against the pillows, feeling the pain medication create a pleasant distance between me and my body. "Good news first. I need something uncomplicated. Your storage unit. I sent someone to photograph everything inside it. Documented the condition of your belongings. Also paid for 6 months in advance. So Sarah's one moan deadline is now irrelevant." Relief washed through me. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Some of your stuff is damaged. Not catastrophically, but enough to matter. Your guitar has a cracked neck. Your grandmother's dishes, the ones in the blue box, several are broken. Your suits look like they were thrown in rather than packed. I'm saying this because it's evidence of willful destruction of property. Your divorce attorney will want photos. The guitar. I'd had it since college. Had learned to play on it during late nights when I couldn't sleep. When the stress of classes and work and trying to build something from nothing had needed an outlet, Sarah had always complained about the noise. Now she'd made sure I'd never play it again. What's the interesting news?" My voice came out flatter than I'd intended. Tom's expression shifted. Got more serious. Marcus was fired this morning. Sarah's company terminated him for misuse of corporate resources. But it gets better. They're pursuing criminal charges, embezzlement, fraud. He charged almost $15,000 in personal expenses to his company card over the past 3 months. Jesus, it gets more interesting. Guess whose idea it was to use the corporate card? I already knew. Sarah's. According to the email trail that somehow made it into the company's investigation, and I'm definitely not saying how that happened, Sarah explicitly told Marcus it was fine, that everyone did it, that as long as he submitted vague expense reports, nobody would notice. She basically coached him into committing a crime. I processed this, turned it over in my mind. So Sarah knew it was illegal. Sarah knew. And now Marcus is looking at potential jail time while Sarah skates free because she was smart enough not to put any of this in writing from her own email account. She used her personal phone text messages that Marcus probably deleted. Probably unless someone had access to cloud backups, unless someone had been systematically preserving those conversations for months. Tom's smile was sharp. Hypothetically speaking, I'd forgotten about the cloud backups. Had set them up years ago for both our phones linked to a shared account. Sarah probably didn't even remember they existed. You backed them up, I said. Someone who had your passwords might have backed them up. That same someone might have anonymously provided those backups to Marcus' legal representation. You know, as a concerned citizen who believes in justice. Tom, don't. He held up a hand. Don't ask me questions you don't want answered. Maintain deniability. Let's just say that Marcus now has evidence that his actions were at Sarah's direction. That changes his legal exposure significantly. It also changed Sarah's. If Marcus's attorney was smart, he'd use those messages to build a defense. Would argue that Marcus was acting under the direction of a superior. Would potentially flip the criminal liability back onto Sarah. She could go to jail, I said slowly. She could probably won't. White collar first offense. She'd likely get probation and fines. But her career is over. Marketing director with a criminal record. She'll be lucky to get hired managing social media for a used car dealership. I should have felt satisfaction. Should have felt the sweet rush of justice being served. Instead, I felt hollow, tired, like I'd been running for so long that stopping felt more like collapse than rest. You don't look happy, Tom observed. I don't know what I feel. That's normal. You just found out your wife is a criminal who tried to destroy your life. You're allowed to have complicated emotions. I wanted her to face consequences. I didn't want her to lose everything. Yes, you did. Tom's voice was gentle, but firm. You absolutely wanted her to lose everything because she tried to take everything from you. The difference is you're a decent person who feels guilty about wanting justice and she's not. He was right. I knew he was right. But knowing and feeling were different countries and I was stuck somewhere in the border region between them. Tom's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression changed. Got brighter. Speaking of consequences, he said, Sarah just tried to check into the resort in the Maldives. Want to guess what happened? You're there. I'm there or I will be in about 6 hours. My flight leaves this afternoon, but I made arrangements. The resort is fully aware that there's a dispute over the reservation. That one of the guests, Sarah, may have made the booking fraudulently. They've been asked to hold the room until the matter is resolved. They can't check in. They can't check in. They're currently in the resort lobby arguing with the manager, who is very polite, very apologetic, and absolutely immovable. Resort policy. Disputed reservations must be resolved before check-in. How long can they hold them up? As long as I want. I'm the third name on the reservation. Remember, I have equal claim, and I'm claiming there's fraud. The resort isn't going to risk legal liability by choosing one guest over another. They'll hold the room empty until we sort it out. I imagined it. Sarah and Marcus, exhausted from a 14-hour flight, dragging luggage through a luxury resort lobby, expecting paradise and finding bureaucracy instead. The manager expressing deep regret. The staff offering complimentary refreshments while they wait. The other guests staring, wondering what kind of people can't even check into their own hotel room. How long will you make them wait? I asked. Long enough to make a point. Then I'll show up, check in, and offer them a deal. What kind of deal? Tom's smile was predatory. They can have the room. I'll relinquish my claim, but Sarah has to sign something first. He pulled a document from his bag, unfolded it on the bed. Legalized paper, dense with text, official looking. I skimmed it, felt my eyebrows rise. This is a settlement agreement. This is a very specific settlement agreement. Sarah acknowledges that she withdrew $48,000 from your joint account without your consent. She agrees to repay that amount within 30 days. She waives any claim to your business assets, including the pending acquisition. She agrees to cover all divorce-related legal costs. And she agrees to vacate the apartment within 7 days and return your possessions undamaged. She'll never sign this. She will if she wants to sleep in a bed tonight instead of the airport. She's stuck in the Maldives, Daniel. No hotel room. Limited cash. Most of what she took is already spent on flights and reservations. She can't just fly home. The tickets are non-refundable. She's trapped. It was elegant, ruthless, and elegant. Put Sarah in a position where she had to choose between her pride and her comfort and bet that comfort would win. What if she refuses? I asked. Then she and Marcus spent 2 weeks homeless in one of the most expensive places on earth, sleeping on beaches and eating gas station food while I enjoy their overwater bungalow and send you photos of the sunset. Either way, she doesn't get what she wanted. I thought about it, tried to find the flaw in the plan, the place where it crossed from justice into cruelty. Couldn't find it. Sarah had stolen from me, had abandoned me, had tried to leave me helpless and broken. Now she was facing the natural consequences of those choices. Do it, I said. Tom nodded, folded the document, tucked it back in his bag. I fly out in 4 hours. I'll handle it personally. Make sure she understands that this is the best offer she's going to get. And if she still refuses, then we proceed with the divorce on your terms. Sue for the money. Pursue criminal charges if possible. Burn her life down legally and systematically until there's nothing left but ashes. He paused. But I don't think she'll refuse. Sarah's smart. She understands cost-benefit analysis. She'll see that signing the agreement is her least bad option. He stood stretched. You should rest. Doctor's orders. Also, we have a meeting with the acquisition team tomorrow. Conference call. You can do it from bed. But we need you sharp tomorrow. They want to accelerate the timeline. Close the deal by end of week instead of end of month. Something about tax advantages and fiscal year-end stuff that I didn't entirely follow. Point is, we're getting paid sooner than expected. $2 million in less than a week. The money Sarah had tried to steal was pocket change compared to what was coming. I'll be ready, I said. Tom paused at the door. Daniel, for what it's worth, I'm sorry this happened. I'm sorry Sarah turned out to be this person, but I'm not sorry you're finding out now instead of 5 years from now or 10 years from now or after you had kids with her. Me neither. He left. I heard him moving around the apartment, making phone calls, organizing his trip, handling the 1,000 details that Tom always handled with effortless competence. I lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling. Tried to sort through the tangle of emotions in my chest. Anger was there, bright and hot and righteous. Grief was there, too, quieter but deeper. Mourning not just for Sarah, but for the version of myself who'd trusted her, who'd believed in the future we'd planned, who'd been naive enough to think that love was enough. And underneath both of those, something else, something harder to name, relief, maybe, or freedom. The marriage had been dying for a year. I'd known it on some level. Had felt the distance growing. Had felt Sarah pulling away. Had felt myself becoming someone I didn't like. Anxious, suspicious, constantly trying to fix problems I couldn't even articulate. Sarah had ended it. Had done it in the cruelest way possible, but she'd ended it. And now I didn't have to pretend anymore. Didn't have to work late to avoid going home to an apartment that felt more like a ceasefire than a home. Didn't have to have awkward conversations about what was wrong, what could be fixed, whether we should try therapy or take a vacation, or just accept that we'd fallen out of love and didn't know how to fall back in. It was over. Messily, painfully, expensively over, but over. My phone, Tom had given me a replacement, already set up with my old number, buzzed on the nightstand. I picked it up. Text message from a number I didn't recognize. Is this Daniel? This is Rachel, the nurse from the helicopter. Tom gave me your number. Just checking in. How's the pain level? I considered the question. The incision hurt, but the medication had it under control. Everything else hurt worse, and there was no medication for that. Manageable, I typed back. Thanks for checking. 3 dots appeared indicating she was typing. Good. Remember, when is information? If it gets worse or if you develop a fever, call immediately. You're still vulnerable to infection. Understood. Also, and this is off the record, Tom told me the situation with your wife. I know you probably don't want advice from a stranger too, but for what it's worth, you're doing better than you think. Most people would be a wreck right now. You're standing upright and making plans. That counts for something. I stared at the message for a long moment. Thank you, I typed. That actually helps anytime. Seriously, Tom has my number if you need anything medical or if you just need someone to tell you you're going to survive this. The dots appeared again, then disappeared, then reappeared. You're going to survive this. I set the phone down, felt something unknown in my chest. There were good people in the world. People like Tom, who showed up when things got hard. People like Rachel, who understood that healing wasn't just about surgical wounds. Sarah had tried to isolate me, had tried to cut me off from support, from resources, from any way to fight back. But she'd underestimated how many people I'd connected with over the years. How many relationships I'd built through work, through friendship, through simply being someone who kept promises and showed up when needed. She thought I was alone. She was wrong. I closed my eyes. Let the medication pull me down toward sleep. Tomorrow would be complicated. Conference calls, legal strategies, the continuing saga of Sarah's self-destruction in paradise. But tonight, in this moment, I was safe. I was cared for. I was surrounded by people who had my back. And somewhere in the mouths, Sarah was learning that actions have consequences. That theft leads to pursuit. That betrayal leads to isolation. That trying to destroy someone can backfire in ways you never imagined. I drifted off with that thought warming me like a fire on a cold night. Justice wasn't finished yet, but it was getting closer. I woke to my phone vibrating against the nightstand like an angry hornet. The room was dark, Tom's blackout curtains doing their job, and for a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then the incision reminded me with a sharp pull and memory flooded back. The cabin, the helicopter, Tom's apartment, Sarah somewhere in the mouths, stuck in a lobby, discovering that paradise had a price she couldn't pay. The phone kept buzzing. I fumbled for it, squinted at the screen. Tom's name glowing in the darkness. I checked the time, 3 o'clock in the morning, which meant it was I did the math through the fog of sleep and residual pain medication. Early afternoon in the mouths. Tell me something good, I said, my voice rough with sleep. Oh, it is better than good, Tom's voice was bright with barely suppressed glee. It's poetry. Are you awake enough to appreciate this? I am now. I'm sitting in the resort restaurant. Beautiful place. Open air, ocean breeze, little birds hopping around looking for crumbs. I'm having grilled fish and a passion fruit juice that costs $23 and is absolutely worth it. And about 30 feet away, visible through the palm trees, Sarah and Marcus are having the worst day of their lives. I sat up carefully, ignoring the protest from my abdomen. Tell me everything. They've been in the lobby for 6 hours. The staff has been incredibly polite, offered them drinks, snacks, a place to sit, but no room. The manager has explained multiple times that there's a dispute over the reservation, and until it's resolved, hotel policy prevents check-in. How's Sarah taking it? About as well as you'd expect. She started off angry, demanded to speak to corporate, threatened to leave bad reviews, pulled out the "do you know how much money I'm spending here" routine. The manager absorbed it all with this serene smile and kept repeating the same thing. Hotel policy, dispute resolution, deeply apologetic for the inconvenience. I could picture it perfectly. Sarah in her carefully chosen vacation outfit, makeup probably still flawless because Sarah never let herself look less than perfect, wielding her anger like a weapon. And the manager trained to handle difficult guests, deflecting every attack with professional courtesy. Then Marcus tried a different approach. Tom continued, went for sympathy, explained that they had had a really long flight, that they were exhausted, that surely there must be some way to sort this out. The manager said absolutely as soon as the third party on the reservation arrives and the dispute is resolved. And that's when you showed up. That's when I showed up, walked right past them to check in. They didn't recognize me at first. You and I don't exactly run in the same social circles. And the one time Sarah met me was at your wedding. I don't think she paid much attention. Tom had been my best man, had given a toast that was funny and heartfelt and had made Sarah cry. Happy tears. I'd thought at the time. Now I wondered if she'd been crying because she already knew even then that the marriage was a performance, that she was marrying someone she'd eventually leave. The manager greeted me by name. Tom asked if I was here to resolve the reservation dispute. I said yes. Sarah heard my name and made the connection. You should have seen her face. Daniel, just complete shock. Then rage. Then this horrible moment where she understood what was happening. What did she say? What the are you doing here? Direct quote. The manager looked uncomfortable. This is a 5-star resort. They're not used to profanity in the lobby. I explained very calmly that I was the third party on the reservation, that I had concerns about fraudulent use of the booking, that I wanted to discuss the matter before anyone checked in. And then Sarah lost it. Started screaming that I had no right, that this was her reservation, that I was harassing her. Marcus tried to calm her down. She turned on him, told him to shut up, that this was his fault somehow. That if he hadn't been so cheap about the expense reports, none of this would be happening. It was beautiful. I felt a stab of something that might have been pity, might have been satisfaction. The two emotions were tangled together, indistinguishable. The manager asked us to take the discussion to a private conference room, Tom said. More for the sake of the other guests than anything else. Sarah was making a scene, so we went. Me, Sarah, Marcus, and the manager. I laid out the situation. You showed her the settlement agreement. I showed her the settlement agreement. Let her read it while I ate complimentary cookies and pretended to be fascinated by the artwork on the walls. She read it twice. Then she said, and again, direct quote, "You've got to be kidding me." But she signed it. Tom's pause was meaningful. Not yet. What? She said she needed to think about it, needed to consult with someone, needed to understand her options. So I said, sure, take your time, but I'm checking into the bungalow now. You two are welcome to figure out your own accommodations. The manager mentioned there's a youth hostel about 20 kilometers away. Basic, but clean. Probably only cost $50 a night. I started laughing. Couldn't help it. The laugh pulled at my incision and hurt like hell, but I couldn't stop. You left them in the lobby. I managed. I left them in the lobby. I'm currently sitting in their overwater bungalow. It's spectacular, by the way. Glass floor panels where you can see fish swimming underneath. Private infinity pool. Outdoor shower. The kind of place that makes you understand why people go into debt for vacations. How long are you going to make them wait? As long as it takes. I've got 2 weeks. My flight home isn't until next month. I rescheduled. Took some vacation time. The acquisition is happening whether I'm in the office or not. So, I'm prepared to sit here eating expensive fish and drinking complicated cocktails while Sarah decides whether her pride is worth more than a bed. It was excessive. It was theatrical. It was exactly the kind of thing Tom would do. It was also working. She'll sign. I said she has to probably, but I'm not making it easy. Around sunset, I'm going to order room service. Lobster thermometer champagne. I'll have it delivered to the bungalow while making sure Sarah can see the delivery cart go by. Let her imagine me eating their romantic vacation dinner alone. You're evil. I'm effective. There's a difference. Dang. His voice shifted, got more serious. Daniel, I need to know how far do you want me to push this because I can keep them out here for days. Can make this as miserable as you want, but I need to know your limits. I thought about it. Really thought about it. Sarah had abandoned me after surgery, had stolen our savings, had locked me out of my own apartment, had tried to leave me helpless and broken while she ran off to paradise with her boyfriend. She deserved to suffer, deserved to face consequences that were proportional to her actions. But there was a line somewhere, a point where justice became cruelty. Where consequences became revenge, where I'd be doing to her what she'd done to me, using power to inflict unnecessary pain. Give her until tomorrow morning, I said. Local time. Let her spend one night figuring out if her pride is worth sleeping on a beach. If she signs by sunrise, give her the room. If she doesn't, then she's choosing to make this a war and we proceed accordingly. Understood. I'll text her the deadline. He paused. How are you doing? Really? Honestly, I don't know. Part of me feels vindicated. Part of me feels like a monster. Part of me just wants to sleep for a week and wake up when all of this is over. All normal. You're grieving and getting revenge simultaneously. It's complicated. Everything's complicated. Not the acquisition. That's simple. We sign papers. We get paid. We move on. Speaking of which, I sent you the revised contracts while you were sleeping. Read them when you can. Nothing major changed. Just some timeline acceleration. I'll look at them today. Good. And Daniel, for what it's worth, you're handling this better than most people would. You're hurt, but you're not broken. That's important. After we hung up, I lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, trying to sort through my feelings. Tom was right. I was hurt, but not broken. Sarah had tried to destroy me, but I was still here, still thinking, still planning, still capable of fighting back. But fighting back came with costs. Every move I made against Sarah was a move away from the person I'd been. The person who believed in second chances, who tried to see the best in people, who thought love could overcome problems if you just worked hard enough. That person was naive. That person had trusted someone who didn't deserve trust. But that person had also been kinder, gentler, less willing to hurt people, even people who hurt him first. I didn't know if I liked who I was becoming, but I knew I couldn't go back to who I'd been. My phone buzzed again. Text message, unknown number. I open it wearily, half expecting more drama from Sarah's unfolding disaster. Instead, hi Daniel, this is Rachel again. Sorry to text so late or early, whatever time it is for you. I'm working a night shift and thinking about my patients. How's the pain? Something loosened in my chest. Someone checking on me, not because they wanted something, not because they were managing fallout, but because they genuinely cared whether I was okay. Better, I typed. Thanks for asking. Shouldn't you be saving lives instead of texting recovering surgical patients? Multitasking is my superpower. Plus, it's a slow night. Everyone's healthy for once. Lucky them. 3 dots. Then Tom told me what's happening with your wife and the Melds. I know I should probably tell you to take the high road and be the bigger person and all that therapeutic, but honestly, I hope she suffers. I smiled at the phone. That makes 2 of us. Good. She abandoned you after surgery. That's not just cruel, it's dangerous. You could have developed complications. Could have had an infection, a wound dehiscence, a dozen things that would have been life-threatening without proper care. She gambled with your life to make a point. I hadn't thought of it that way. Had been so focused on the emotional betrayal that I'd minimized the physical risk. But Rachel was right. I'd been 3 days post-surgery, still vulnerable to infection, to complications, to any number of medical emergencies that would have been catastrophic in a remote cabin with no phone and no transportation. Sarah had known that. The doctor had explained it explicitly, and Sarah had left me there anyway. You're right, I typed. I could have died. You could have. The fact that you didn't is luck, not her mercy. Don't forget that when you start feeling guilty about fighting back. How did you know I was feeling guilty? Because you seem like a decent person. Decent people feel guilty when they hurt others, even others who deserve it. But guilt is just fear wearing a moral costume. Don't let it make you weak. I stared at that message for a long time. Are you always this insightful at 3 in the morning? Night shifts either make you philosophical or crazy. I choose philosophical. Thank you for checking on me, for saying what I needed to hear. Anytime. Seriously, I mean it. You have my number. Use it if you need to. The conversation ended there, but I kept looking at my phone, rereading her messages, feeling something shift in my chest. Not attraction, not yet, anyway. I was too raw for that. Too tangled up in the wreckage of my marriage to think about anything else but recognition. Maybe the sense that there were people in the world who saw clearly, who didn't sugarcoat reality, who understood that sometimes kindness meant being honest instead of nice. I got out of bed carefully, made my way to the kitchen. Tom had stocked the fridge with the kind of food that required actual cooking. Fresh vegetables, good cheese, bread from the bakery downtown. I made myself a sandwich. Ate it standing at the window looking out over the city. Lights everywhere. Thousands of them. Millions. Each one representing someone with their own complications, their own betrayals, their own moments of having to decide whether to fight back or let go. How many of them were lying awake right now wrestling with the same questions? How many had chosen revenge and regretted it? How many had chosen forgiveness and regretted that? My phone buzzed. Tom again. She's asking questions. Wants to know if the settlement is negotiable. It's not. I type back. That's what I told her. She's asking what happens if she refuses to sign. Then we proceed with the divorce. Sue for the money. Pursue every legal remedy available. Make it as expensive and miserable as possible. I'll relay that message. Might soften the language a bit. Don't let her understand exactly what she's choosing. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. You sure? This is scorched earth territory. Was I sure? Was I ready to commit to that level of warfare? I thought about the cabin, about waking up alone in pain, abandoned, about the keys on the floor, about Sarah's laughter as she drove away, about the fact that she'd been willing to risk my life to make her escape clean. I'm sure, I typed. Okay, your call. I'll update you in a few hours. I finished my sandwich, took my medication, went back to bed, and lay in the darkness, listening to the city outside, waiting for dawn. Somewhere in the mouths, Sarah was making a choice. Sign the agreement and admit defeat or refuse and face a war she couldn't win. Either way, she was learning the same lesson I'd learned in that cabin. Actions have consequences. Betrayal has costs. And some people, when you try to break them, become something harder instead. I closed my eyes and waited for morning, for news from paradise, for the next chapter in a story that was no longer about love or marriage or trying to save something that was already dead. This was about something simpler now. Survival, justice, and the cold, clear satisfaction of watching someone who tried to destroy you realize they'd miscalculated. Sleep came slowly, but it came. And when it did, I dreamed of fire and snow and keys falling into deep water where no one could reach them. The call came at 7 in the morning. I was already awake, had been for an hour, lying in bed and running through scenarios, trying to predict Sarah's next move, trying to prepare for every possible outcome. The incision hurt less this morning. Either the healing was accelerating or I was getting used to the pain. Hard to tell the difference. Tom's name on the screen. I answered before the first ring finished. She signed 2 words, simple, definitive. The end of something. I sat up, ignoring the pull in my abdomen. When 20 minutes ago, she held out until sunrise like you predicted. Spent the night on a beach chair by the pool. Marcus tried to find them a hotel room. Turns out everything within reasonable distance is booked solid. Peak season. The youth hostel I mentioned full. They would have had to drive almost 50 kilometers to find anything available. So she had no choice. She had a choice. She chose comfort over pride, which to be fair is what most people would choose. Tom's voice carried satisfaction, but also something else. Weariness maybe, or the particular exhaustion that comes from watching someone destroy themselves. She cried while she signed it. Marcus sat next to her looking like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. I tried to imagine it. Sarah, exhausted and humiliated, putting her signature on a document that acknowledged her theft, her betrayal, her complete miscalculation of who she was dealing with. Marcus watching his romantic escape turn into a legal nightmare. Did she say anything? Oh, she said plenty. Called me every name you can imagine. Said you were a controlling bastard. That you'd always been obsessed with money, that you were doing this out of spite because you couldn't handle being left. The manager looked uncomfortable. This is a luxury resort. They're not used to guests screaming about divorce settlements in the lobby at dawn. But she signed. She signed. I have the document witnessed by the hotel manager and notarized. Turns out the resort keeps a notary on staff for exactly these kinds of situations. Rich people and their legal dramas. The agreement is binding. I felt something release in my chest. Not happiness exactly, more like the absence of tension. The way a muscle relaxes after being clenched for too long. $48,000, I said. Within 30 days. Within 30 days. And if she doesn't pay, the agreement includes language allowing you to pursue collection through wage garnishment, asset seizure, all the usual remedies. She won't be able to avoid it. In the apartment, she has 7 days to vacate, has to return your possessions undamaged or pay fair market value for replacements. The agreement is very specific. I spent 2 hours last night making sure every loophole was closed. 2 hours. While I'd been sleeping in his guest room, Tom had been working, protecting me, ensuring that Sarah couldn't wriggle out of consequences through technicalities or creative interpretation. Thank you, I said. The words felt inadequate. You do the same for me. You have done the same for me. Remember when Jennifer tried to claim she was owed half the company despite never being an employee or investor? You spent weeks building the documentation that killed her case. I remembered Tom's ex-girlfriend, who decided after they broke up that living with him for 2 years entitled her to equity in our business. We'd fought that claim together, had won, had learned that sometimes relationships end with lawyers instead of closure. I should have learned the lesson then. Should have protected myself better. So, what happens now? I asked. Now I give them the room. Let them have what's left of their vacation. They paid for 2 weeks. They've got 13 days left. I'm flying home tomorrow. Got what I came for. The signed agreement. The signed agreement. And the satisfaction of watching Sarah realize she's not as smart as she thinks she is. He paused. There's something else. Something she said while she was signing. What? She said you'd change. That the person she married would never have done something like this. That you used to be kind and now you're cruel. The words hit harder than they should have. I'd been thinking the same thing, wondering if fighting back had transformed me into something I didn't recognize. What did you say? I asked. I told her she was right. That you had changed. That people change when someone tries to destroy them. That kindness only works when it's reciprocated. And she stopped reciprocating months ago. Tom's voice hardened. I told her that she created this version of you. That if she wanted kind Daniel, she should have treated kind Daniel with basic human decency. I closed my eyes, felt the truth of it settle in my bones. Sarah had changed me. Had taken someone who trusted easily and taught him suspicion. Had taken someone who believed in second chances and taught him about consequences. Had taken someone who thought love was enough and taught him that love without respect is just a pretty word for exploitation. You still there? Tom asked. Yeah, just thinking. Well, think about this. We have the acquisition call in 2 hours. Conference with the buyers. Final contract review, timeline confirmation. You need to be sharp. Can you do that? Could I? Could I switch from thinking about my destroyed marriage to thinking about selling in the company Tom and I had built together? Could I compartmentalize that completely? I'd have to. The acquisition was the foundation. Everything else was built on. The money that would let me rebuild my life. The proof that all those years of 60-hour weeks had been worth something. I can do it, I said. Good. I'll be on the call from here. Turns out the resort has excellent Wi-Fi. One of us should probably wear pants, though. I'll let you handle that. He hung up. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the morning light come through the windows, feeling the weight of everything that had happened and everything that was still to come. Sarah had signed. The money would be returned. The apartment would be vacated. The divorce would proceed on my terms. I'd won. So, why didn't it feel like victory? I forced myself to stand, to shower, and to dress in actual clothes instead of the pajamas I've been living in. The act of putting on pants, a shirt, of looking like a functional human being helped. Costume is armor. Fake it until you make it. My phone buzzed with an email notification. The acquisition contract revised and ready for review. I made coffee. Real coffee using Tom's expensive machine that probably cost more than my first car and settled at the kitchen table with my laptop. The contract was dense pages of legal language, terms and conditions, representations and warranties, but the core of it was simple. The acquiring company would purchase our business for $4.6 million. Tom and I each own 50%. After taxes and fees, I'd clear just over $2 million. $2 million. The number still didn't feel real. For years, Tom and I had been scraping by, reinvesting every profit back into the company, paying ourselves barely enough to survive. We'd believed in what we were building, but belief doesn't pay rent. And then 18 months ago, everything had shifted. We'd landed a contract with a major tech company. Then another, then another. Word of mouth in our industry, a small specialized field where reputation meant everything. Suddenly, we had more work than we could handle. We're hiring employees, we're turning down clients because we didn't have capacity. The acquiring company had approached us 3 months ago, had seen what we were building and wanted to absorb it into their larger operation. Had offered numbers that made my head spin. Sarah had known about the initial approach. I'd told her we were in talks, that something big might be happening. She'd seemed interested, had asked questions, had suggested we might finally be able to buy that house we'd been saving for, but I hadn't told her the numbers, hadn't mentioned that something big meant life-changing money, had kept it vague, partially for superstition, didn't want to jinx it, and partially because I'd already started to suspect that Sarah's interest in our future was negotiable. Good instinct. As it turned out, if Sarah had known about the $2 million, she never would have settled for stealing $48,000. She would have waited, would have filed for divorce after the acquisition closed, would have fought for half of everything in the settlement. But she didn't know. And now, thanks to the agreement she'd signed this morning in a Maldives' hotel lobby, she'd waived any claim to business assets, including the pending sale. She'd traded $2 million for one night in a luxury resort. The irony was almost poetic. I reviewed the contract carefully, making notes, flagging sections that needed clarification. Tom and I had a good lawyer, the same one who'd helped us fight off his ex-girlfriend's claims, and she'd already reviewed everything. But I wanted to understand every clause myself. This was too important to delegate completely. At 9 o'clock, my laptop chimed with the video conference invitation. I joined the call. Faces appeared on screen, the acquisition team, 3 executives from the buying company, their lawyer, their CFO. Tom joined from the Malds, sitting on what looked like a balcony with ocean visible behind him. Our lawyer appeared from her office downtown. Hair perfect despite the early hour. "Gentlemen," the lead executive says, a woman named Patricia who'd been our main contact throughout negotiations. "Thank you for making time. I know we're accelerating the timeline, and I appreciate your flexibility." "Happy to accommodate," Tom said smoothly. "Daniel and I have reviewed the revised contracts. Everything looks good from our end." "Excellent. Then let's walk through the key changes." For the next 90 minutes, we discussed terms. Clarified language, negotiated minor points. I forced myself to focus, to be present, to think about equity structures and earnout provisions instead of Sarah crying while signing away her claim to this exact money. It felt surreal sitting in Tom's apartment 3 days after emergency surgery, discussing millions of dollars while my marriage disintegrated thousands of miles away. But I did it. Participated, asked intelligent questions, made decisions. Compartmentalization, the skill every successful person needs. The ability to put one part of your life in a box, close the lid, and focus on whatever else needs attention. "I think we're aligned," Patricia said finally. "If you're both comfortable, we can move to signature. Final closing will be Friday, 3 days from now. Funds will transfer within 24 hours of signing." Friday, 3 days. I looked at Tom through the video screen. He looked at me. We've been partners for 7 years. Had started this company in his apartment with a laptop and a dream and no idea if it would work. Had survived lean years, difficult clients, the endless grind of building something from nothing. Now we were ending it, selling it, moving on. Tom raised his eyebrows. "A question?" I nodded. "We're in." Tom said, "Let's do this." Our lawyer shared her screen, displayed the signature page. We each signed digitally, my name appearing in black pixels on a white background, making it official. $4.6 million, changing hands, changing lives. The call ended. Everyone disconnected. I sat at the kitchen table staring at my laptop screen, feeling the magnitude of what had just happened, trying to process through my exhausted brain. My phone rang. Tom, calling back immediately. "We did it," he said. His voice was strange, thick with emotion. "We did it. 7 years all leading to this." "Yeah. Daniel, are you okay? Really okay?" Was I? I'd just signed documents that would make me wealthy. Should be celebrating. Should be excited. Instead, I felt hollow, tired, like I'd run a marathon and someone had forgotten to put a finish line at the end. "I don't know," I admitted. "Everything's happening so fast. The surgery, Sarah, the acquisition, it's too much. My brain can't keep up." "That's normal. You're in survival mode. Once things settle, once the immediate crisis is over, then you'll process. Then you'll feel it." "Feel what?" "Everything. The grief, the anger, the relief, the excitement about the money. Right now, you're just trying to get through each day. That's fine. That's healthy. Just don't forget to actually feel things once you can afford to." After we hung up, I sat in silence, letting Tom's words sink in. He was right. I'd been in crisis mode since the moment Sarah drove away from the cabin. Had been making decisions, taking action, fighting back, but not really feeling any of it. Emotions were dangerous when you needed to think clearly. So, I'd put them away. Promised myself I'd deal with them later. Later was coming. Whether I was ready or not. My phone buzzed. Text message from Rachel. Saw your calendar reminder about the acquisition call. How'd it go? I blinked at the phone. Calendar reminder. Then I remembered Tom had set up my new phone with all my old data, including calendar events, including the acquisition meeting that had been scheduled for weeks. It went well. We're signing Friday. Congratulations. That's huge. Thanks. Doesn't quite feel real yet. Give it time. Big life changes never feel real immediately. Your brain needs time to adjust to the new reality. You sound like a therapist. Nursing school includes a lot of psychology. We're trained to recognize trauma and help people cope. Speaking of which, have you eaten today? I looked at my empty coffee cup. Realized I'd had coffee and nothing else. Not yet. Eat something. Protein if possible. Your body needs fuel to heal. Yes, ma'am. Don't. Yes, ma'am. Me. I'm serious. You're recovering from surgery and dealing with major stress. Nutrition matters. Also, how's the pain level? Manageable. That's not a number. On a scale of 1 to 10, 4, maybe 5. That's acceptable for day 4 post-op. But if it gets above 6 or if you notice any redness, swelling, or fever, you need to see a doctor immediately. I promise. Good. Now, go eat something. I smiled at my phone despite everything. Rachel's bossiness was oddly comforting. Someone caring about mundane things like whether I'd eaten, whether I was taking care of myself. Someone who wasn't asking me to make decisions or sign documents or figure out legal strategies. Just someone telling me to eat lunch. I made myself a proper meal. Eggs, toast, the kind of breakfast my mother used to make when I was sick as a kid. Comfort food, simple and satisfying. While I ate, I thought about the math. $48,000 coming back from Sarah within 30 days. $2 million coming from the acquisition within a week. I'd gone from having nothing, less than nothing, negative $48,000 to having more money than I'd ever imagined. Money didn't fix everything. Didn't heal the betrayal. Didn't undo the year of slow deterioration that had led to Sarah's final abandonment. But money was options. Money was freedom. Money was the ability to rebuild on my own terms. Sarah would get $48,000 back to me, probably resentfully, probably while complaining to Marcus about how unfair it all was. She'd never know about the $2 million. Would never know what she'd given up by signing that agreement. And that, I realized, was its own kind of justice. Not the dramatic kind. Not the kind that came with confrontation and shouting and forcing someone to acknowledge what they'd done. The quiet kind. The kind where someone makes a choice and lives with consequences they don't even fully understand. Sarah had chosen Marcus over me. Had chosen a vacation over our marriage. Had chosen $48,000 over waiting to see what else might be available. She'd made her choice. Now she'd live with it. And I'd move forward. Wounded but healing. Hurt but not broken. Richer than I'd ever been in ways that had nothing to do with money. I finished eating, took my medication, went back to bed, not because I was tired, but because rest was part of healing. And I was determined to heal. All of me, not just the incision. The apartment looked different in daylight. I stood on the sidewalk outside the building I'd called home for 4 years. Staring up at the windows of the 3rd floor corner unit. Our unit, except it wasn't our anymore. According to the settlement agreement Sarah had signed, she had 7 days to vacate. This was day 5. Tom stood beside me, hands in his pockets, studying the building with the same analytical expression he used when evaluating code. "You don't have to do this," he said. "I can go in, get your stuff, you can wait in the car. I need to see it." "Why? Why put yourself through that?" I didn't have a good answer. Just knew that I needed to witness this final dismantling. Needed to see the physical evidence of the marriage ending. Needed to stand in the space where Sarah and I had pretended to be happy and acknowledge that the pretendings is over. The building manager met us in the lobby. A tired-looking woman named Mrs. Chen, who'd always been kind to me, who'd once brought me soup when I had the flu, who'd clearly been briefed on the situation and looked uncomfortable about the whole thing. "I'm sorry about this, Daniel," she said, handing me a new set of keys. "Sarah explained that you'd been locked out by mistake. I didn't realize. I should have asked more questions. It's not your fault. Still, if I'd known you were recovering from surgery, that you had nowhere to go." She shook her head. "Anyway, she's not here right now. Left this morning with some suitcases. Said she'd be back later to get the rest." We rode the elevator in silence. The hallway looked the same. Beige carpet, neutral walls, the kind of generic luxury that suggested success without personality. I'd walked this hallway hundreds of times, coming home from work, leaving for work, taking out trash, living a life that had felt real at the time, but now seemed like a performance I hadn't realized I was giving. The new key turned smoothly in the new lock. The door opened. The apartment was a crime scene. Not literally, no blood, no violence, nothing that would bring police, but a crime had been committed here. The crime of erasure, the systematic removal of every trace that had ever existed in this space. The living room furniture was still there. Couch, coffee table, TV, but my chair was gone. The leather recliner I'd bought after my first big client payment. The one I'd sit in to read or think or just decompress after difficult days. Gone. The walls were empty, photographs removed, leaving behind lighter squares on the paint where frames had hung. Pictures of us on vacation, at weddings, at dinners with friends. Our life together, documented and then erased. I walked through the space slowly, cataloging the absence. Tom followed, silent, letting me process. The bookshelf still stood against the far wall, but half of the books were gone. My books, the technical manuals, the business biographies, the novels I'd collected over years. I ran my finger along the empty space where they'd been, feeling the dust that had accumulated behind them. She took your books, Tom said quietly. She never even read them. Used to complain about how much space they took up. She's not keeping them. She's denying them to you. There's a difference. The kitchen was worse. My coffee maker, gone. The cast iron skillet I'd inherited from my father, gone. The knife set we'd received as a wedding present, gone. Even the magnets on the refrigerator, stupid tourist magnets from places we'd visited together, all removed. I opened the refrigerator, empty except for condiments. Opened the freezer. Nothing. She cleaned out the food, I said. Probably didn't want it to spoil while she was in the mouths. Threw it all away rather than leave it for you. The bedroom was the worst. The bed was still there. California king, expensive mattress, the kind of bed that suggested prosperity. But my nightstand was gone. The lamp I used for reading gone. The closet stood open and half of it was empty. My clothes removed, but not carefully. Hangers scattered on the floor. A few items left behind, trampled, obviously discarded as not worth taking. I picked up a shirt from the floor. Oxford cloth, blue, one of my favorites. There was a footprint on it. Someone had literally stepped on it. Jesus, Tom breathed. The bathroom was similarly violated. My shaving kit gone. My toothbrush obviously gone, but the holder it had sat in was also gone. The shower contained only Sarah's products. My shampoo, my soap, all of it removed. Even the medicine cabinet was cleaned out. My prescription bottles, my vitamins, my basic first aid supplies, all gone. I stood in the bathroom doorway, looking at the space where my things had been, feeling something crack in my chest. This was what hate looked like. Not anger, not disappointment. Hate. The systematic removal of someone from their own life. The willful destruction of evidence that they'd ever existed here. She could have packed your stuff carefully, Tom said from behind me. Could have put it in storage neatly. Instead, she made it clear exactly what she thinks of me. My phone rang. I pulled it out, saw Sarah's name, felt my jaw tighten. Don't answer it, Tom said. I answered it. What? I know you're in the apartment. Sarah's voice was sharp, brittle. Mrs. Chen texted me. You had no right to go in there without telling me. I have every right. It's my apartment, too. And according to the settlement you signed, you have 2 days left to be out completely. I'm working on it. Moving takes time. Destroying someone's belongings takes time. You mean silence on the other end. Then I didn't destroy anything. My shirt has a footprint on it, Sarah. My books are gone. My coffee maker, my kitchen stuff, half my clothes, all gone. You didn't pack them for me. You threw them away. I took what was mine, what I'd contributed to the household. You took my father's skillet, the one he left me when he med. How exactly did you contribute that to the household? More silence. Longer this time. Fine. Her voice had shifted. Got colder. You want your precious belongings? They're in the storage unit. The one I mentioned. Most of them. Anyway, some things I don't know where they are. You threw them away. I don't have to explain myself to you. We're getting divorced. This is what happens. People separate their lives. People separate their lives with basic human decency. They don't vandalize each other's possessions. Vandalize? You want to talk about vandalism? You ruined my vacation, Daniel. You humiliated me in front of Marcus. You made me sleep on a beach because you wanted to feel powerful. I made you face consequences for stealing from me. I didn't steal $48,000 from a joint account taken without discussion or permission while I was recovering from surgery. That's theft. The only reason you're not facing criminal charges is because I'm showing you more mercy than you showed me. Mercy? She laughed. It was an ugly sound. You call what you did mercy. You hunted me down. Tracked me to another country. Trapped me there like some kind of psychopath. I protected my assets from someone who'd proven herself willing to steal them. God, listen to yourself. My assets, like that's all that matters. Like money is the only thing worth caring about. Says the woman who stole money to fund a vacation with her affair partner. Marcus is not. She stopped. Caught herself, but it was too late. Not what, Sarah? Not an affair partner. Were you going to claim he's just a friend? That the hotel room, the romantic getaway, the fact that you left your husband to go him in paradise? Were you going to claim that's all innocent? You're disgusting. I'm disgusting. I'm not the one who abandoned someone after surgery. I'm not the one who stole money. I'm not the one who destroyed belongings out of spite. You changed the reservation. You sent someone to harass us. You made me sign that ridiculous agreement under duress. Duress? You had a choice. Sign it or find your own accommodations. That's called consequences, not duress. I want a lawyer to look at that agreement. I think it's not enforceable. Something cold settled in my stomach. Try it. Please get a lawyer. Let them explain to you how badly you'll lose if you try to fight this. You signed willingly. It was witnessed and notarized. You had the option to refuse. You chose comfort over fighting. That's on you. Everything is always on me, isn't it? Nothing is ever your fault. You work too much. That's my fault for being demanding. You didn't pay attention to me. That's my fault for being needy. I fell out of love with you. That's my fault for being ungrateful. You didn't fall out of love, Sarah. You planned an escape. There's a difference. People who fall out of love have conversations. They try therapy. They make difficult decisions together. You made decisions alone and then executed them in the cruelest way possible. I did what I had to do to get free of you. No, you did what you wanted to do because you thought I was helpless. Thought I wouldn't fight back. You're right about one thing, she said, and her voice had gone quiet. Dangerous. I did underestimate you. I thought you were a decent person. Turns out you're just as bad as everyone else. Worse, maybe because you pretend to be good while doing terrible things. I'm protecting myself from you. That's not terrible. That's survival. Call it whatever helps you sleep at night. But we both know the truth. You're punishing me not because I stole money. Not because I cheated. You're punishing me because I didn't love you enough. Because I chose someone else. Your ego can't handle that. The words hit like a physical blow. Maybe because there was a grain of truth in them. Maybe because I wasn't entirely sure of my own motivations anymore. Was I pursuing justice or revenge? Was I protecting myself or hurting Sarah because she'd hurt me first? 2 days, I said, keeping my voice level. You have 2 days to be out completely. After that, I'm changing the locks again. Anything you leave behind becomes mine. I'll be out. I don't want to spend another second in a space that smells like you. She hung up. I stood in the bedroom, phone in hand, feeling my heart race, feeling anger and hurt and confusion all tangled together in my chest. Tom touched my shoulder. You okay? No. Fair. That was brutal. She's right, isn't she? Part of what she said. I am punishing her. So what? She tried to destroy you. Punishment is appropriate. But where's the line? When does justice become revenge? When do I stop being the victim and become the villain? Tom was quiet for a moment. Then I don't think there's a clear line. I think there's a gray area where both things are true simultaneously. You can be justified in your actions and still be causing someone pain. Those aren't mutually exclusive. That doesn't help. It's not supposed to help. It's supposed to be honest. He moved to the window, looked out at the city. Sarah made choices. Those choices have consequences. You're enforcing those consequences. That's not villain. That's the basic operating system of adult life. Actions, outcomes, responsibility. She said I changed. That I'm not the person she married. You did change. People change when they're betrayed, when they have to fight for survival, when they learn that the person they trusted is actually their enemy. He turned back to me. You want to know what I think? I think the person Sarah married was too trusting, too willing to assume the best in people. That person would have let Sarah walk all over him, would have accepted the abandonment and the theft, and tried to understand her perspective, tried to empathize with her pain. And that's bad. It's self-destructive. Empathy is great until someone weaponizes it against you. Then it's just weakness wearing a moral costume. He paused. You're not a villain, Daniel. You're just not a victim anymore. Sarah's having trouble with that transition. We spent the next hour documenting everything, taking photos of the empty spaces, the missing belongings, the trampled clothes, evidence for the divorce proceedings, proof that Sarah hadn't upheld her end of the settlement agreement about returning possessions undamaged, more ammunition for the war we were fighting. The storage unit was across town. We drove there in Tom's car, neither of us talking much. The unit was small, climate-controlled, secured with a padlock. I had the key. Sarah had left it with Mrs. Chen. Inside, my life was stacked in boxes, some carefully packed, some obviously thrown together hastily. My books, my clothes, kitchen items, the detritus of 4 years of cohabitation, now compressed into a 10 by 10 space that smelled like cardboard and abandonment. I found my father's skillet in a box marked kitchen. It was wrapped in newspaper. Actually protected, which surprised me. Maybe Sarah had some limits to her cruelty. Or maybe she'd just been afraid I'd sue for its value if it was damaged. The guitar was there, too. Tom had been right. The neck was cracked. Not catastrophically, but enough that it would need professional repair. Maybe enough that it would never sound quite the same. I picked it up carefully, feeling the weight of it, remembering late nights in college, playing badly but enthusiastically. Remembering the day my father had given it to me had said every man should have a way to express himself that didn't require words. Can it be fixed? Tom asked. Maybe, probably, but it won't be the same. Nothing's ever the same after it breaks. Even when you repair it, you can still see the cracks. We loaded boxes into Tom's car, made multiple trips. By the time we finished, the sun was setting, painting the city in shades of orange and gold that would have been beautiful if I'd been capable of appreciating beauty. Back at Tom's apartment, we stacked boxes in the guest room. My possessions, my former life, everything I owned in the world, minus whatever Sarah had thrown away or kept out of spite. I sat on the bed surrounded by boxes, feeling the full weight of everything that had happened, settle onto my shoulders. 1 week ago, I'd been married, had lived in an apartment, had a routine, a life, a future that seemed stable, even if it wasn't happy. Now, I was divorced in all but the legal paperwork. Homeless, living out of boxes in my business partner's guest room. My body was healing from surgery, but everything else felt broken in ways I didn't know how to fix. My phone buzzed. Text from Rachel. How are you doing? And before you say fine, remember that I can tell when patients are lying. I smiled despite everything. Went to the apartment today. Saw what Sarah left behind or didn't leave behind. That bad? Worse, she destroyed some things. Took others. Made it very clear that she wants me erased from her life. I'm sorry. That's cruel. Yeah. Where are you now? Tom's place. Surrounded by boxes trying to figure out what comes next. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. This might be forward, sweet, but do you want company? I'm off shift in an hour. I could bring food. You probably haven't eaten. I looked at the text for a long moment. Company? The idea of not being alone with my thoughts, of having someone there who didn't need anything from me, who wasn't involved in the legal warfare, who just wanted to make sure I ate dinner. That would be nice, I typed. Thai food. Okay, perfect. See you in 90 minutes. I set the phone down. Tom appeared in the doorway. I'm ordering pizza, he said. You want? He saw my expression. What? Rachel's coming over. Bringing food. Tom's eyebrows rose. The nurse from the helicopter? Yeah. Aha. He smiled. Good. You could use a friend who isn't me. It's not like that. She's just checking on a patient. Sure. Just a professional courtesy call with dinner at night at your place. It's not my place. It's your place. Semantics. He pushed off the door frame. I'll make myself scarce. Go see a movie or something. Give you privacy. Tom, take the win, Daniel. Someone kind is coming over. Let yourself enjoy that without overanalyzing it. He was right. I was too tired to argue. 90 minutes later, Rachel arrived with bags of Thai food and a smile that made something in my chest unclench. We ate. We talked. We didn't discuss Sarah or divorce or consequences. We talked about nothing important. And everything important simultaneously. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe I'd survive this after all. The acquisition closed on a Friday morning. I sat at Tom's kitchen table with my laptop, watching numbers appear in my bank account that didn't feel real. $2,147,000 after taxes, fees, legal costs, Money that represented 7 years of work, of sacrifice, of building something from nothing, money that Sarah would never touch. Tom sat across from me, staring at his own screen, his expression caught between disbelief and satisfaction. "We did it," he said for the third time in 10 minutes. "We did it." I keep refreshing to make sure it's still there, like it might disappear if I look away. I understood the impulse. The number was too large to feel concrete, too abstract to trigger the emotional response it probably deserved. I was a millionaire. Past tense poor, present tense wealthy. But I felt exactly the same as I had an hour ago. Except I didn't. Something had shifted. Some fundamental anxiety about survival, about security, about whether I'd be okay. That anxiety had dissolved. Not completely, but enough to breathe differently. My phone rang. Our lawyer. "Congratulations," she said. Her voice carried the warmth of someone who just earned a very large fee. "The transfer is complete. The company is officially sold. You're both free to move on to whatever comes next. Thank you for everything." "My pleasure. And Daniel, one more thing. I received a letter this morning from Sarah's attorney." My stomach tightened. "What kind of letter?" "They're contesting the settlement agreement, claiming it was signed under duress. They want it nullified." I closed my eyes. Of course. Of course Sarah couldn't just accept defeat. Had to fight. Had to try one more angle. "Can they do that?" I asked. "They can try. They won't win. The agreement was properly executed. Sarah had legal capacity. She wasn't threatened. She was offered a choice and made one. But they can file motions, drag things out, make noise. How long? Depends on the judge. Could be a few weeks, could be a few months. Either way, I'm confident we'll prevail. The evidence is on our side." After we hung up, I sat staring at my laptop screen. At the number in my account that should have felt like victory but now felt complicated by Sarah's refusal to accept consequences. Tom watched me. "She's fighting the settlement. Her lawyer is same thing. It won't work. You know that, right? She signed. It's done. Doesn't matter if it works. Matters that she's trying, that she can't just let this end. Has to keep fighting. Keep making it harder. I stopped. Took a breath. "I'm tired, Tom. I'm so tired of this. I know. I just want it to be over. Want to move on. Start building something new instead of fighting over the wreckage of something dead." Tom stood, moved to the coffee maker, started brewing a fresh pot. The mechanical sounds were soothing, familiar, normal. "You want my advice?" he asked. "Always. Stop fighting. Let the lawyers handle it. You've done your part. You've protected yourself. Enforced consequences. Made sure Sarah doesn't profit from what she did. Now, step back. Let the legal system grind through its process. Use your energy for something better." "Like what?" "Like finding a place to live. Like figuring out what you want your life to look like now that you have resources. Like maybe spending time with a certain nurse who's texted you every day this week." I felt my face warm. "It's not like that. It could be if you wanted it to be, if you were ready. I'm not ready." "Fair enough. But eventually you will be. And when you are, it's okay to let yourself be happy. Sarah doesn't get to own your future just because she destroyed your past." The coffee maker beeped. Tom poured 2 cups, handed me one. We sat in comfortable silence, drinking coffee that cost $10 a pound and tasted like it. Looking out at the city through floor-to-ceiling windows that made the world look manageable. "I'm going to start looking at apartments today." I said. "Can't live in your guest room forever. You can live here as long as you need, but yeah, your own space would be good." "What kind of place are you thinking?" "Something simple. Not too big. Maybe a view. Definitely parking. I need to buy a car since Sarah still has mine. Sue her for it." "I will." Adding it to the list of things my lawyer is handling. My phone buzzed. Text from Rachel. "How'd the signing go?" "Done. Official." "Weird." "Weird how?" "Like winning the lottery, but feeling too numb to celebrate." "That's normal. Big life changes take time to process." "Want to talk about it?" "I'm off tonight. Could meet for coffee." I looked at the message, thought about Rachel's easy smile, her directness, the way she seemed to see through my defenses without making me feel exposed. Tom was watching me over his coffee cup. Raised his eyebrows meaningfully. "Coffee sounds good," I typed. "Where and when?" "That place on 5th. The one with the good pastries. 6 o'clock. See you there." Tom grinned. "Not like that, huh? It's coffee. Friends have coffee. Friends who text every day and meet for coffee are usually called something else. I just got out of a marriage, Tom. A bad one. I'm not ready for anything else. I didn't say you were ready for a relationship. I said you were ready for coffee. Those are different things. Let yourself have coffee without worrying about what it means. He was right. As usual, I was overthinking, making everything complicated when maybe some things could just be simple. I spent the afternoon looking at apartment listings online. The budget was different now. Wasn't limited to what I could afford on a modest salary. Could look at places I'd only dreamed about before. Penthouses with terraces, lofts in converted buildings, modern high-rises with amenities that sounded like resort features, pools, gyms, rooftop gardens, concierge services. But the fancy places didn't appeal. They felt like someone else's dream, like I'd be performing wealth instead of living comfortably. I found myself drawn to smaller places, one-bedroom apartments in quiet neighborhoods, buildings with character instead of luxury. Places where I could imagine actually living instead of staging for some imaginary audience. One listing caught my attention. Third floor walk-up in an older building. Hardwood floors, exposed brick, big windows facing east. Kitchen was small but functional. Bathroom had been updated. The bedroom was cozy without being cramped. The listing mentioned a balcony, just big enough for a chair and a small table. The photo showed it overlooking a tree-lined street, quiet and residential. I could imagine sitting there with coffee in the morning, reading, thinking, watching the neighborhood wake up. I called the leasing office, made an appointment to see it tomorrow, and at 5:30, I showered, changed into clean clothes, checked my incision, healing well, barely tender anymore. 10 days post-surgery, I'd survived the immediate danger. Now I just had to survive everything else. The coffee shop was a 10-minute walk from Tom's place. I arrived early, ordered a black coffee, found a table by the window, watched people pass by on the sidewalk. Everyone moving with purpose, going somewhere, doing something, living lives that probably contained their own complications, but looked simple from the outside. Rachel arrived exactly at 6. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair down instead of pulled back, looking younger and softer than she had in her nurse scrubs. "Hey," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "You look better. Less like a surgical patient, more like a regular human." "Thanks. I think it's a compliment. 2 weeks ago, you looked like you were about to die. Now you just look tired." "I am tired." She ordered a latte from the server who appeared. We sat in silence for a moment, but it wasn't awkward, just quiet. "So," she said, "you're officially rich now. How did you?" Tom mentioned the acquisition was closing today. "Basic math. You own at half the company. Company sold for millions, therefore rich." She smiled. "Don't worry. I'm not going to ask you for money or treat you differently. Just acknowledging the elephant in the room so we can move past it," I laughed. "Couldn't help it. You're very direct. Nursing teaches you that. No time for dancing around difficult topics when someone's bleeding. Better to just say the thing and deal with it." "I appreciate that." Her latte arrived. She added sugar, stirred it slowly. "How are you feeling about everything? And I don't mean physically. I mean the whole situation, Sarah, the divorce, the sudden wealth, all of it. Honestly, I don't know. It's too much to process. Feels like it's happening to someone else and I'm just watching. Dissociation, common response to trauma. Your brain can't handle everything at once. So, it creates distance. Makes you an observer instead of a participant. Is that bad? Not necessarily. It's protective. Lets you function while your psyche figures out how to integrate what happened. Just don't stay dissociated forever. Eventually, you'll need to actually feel things. Everyone keeps telling me that. Tom said the same thing because it's true. Unfelt emotions don't disappear. They just wait. Get stronger. Come back when you're not expecting them. I sip my coffee. "You sound like you're speaking from experience." Her expression shifted. Got more guarded. "I had a bad breakup a few years ago. Different circumstances than yours, but similar in some ways. He didn't abandon me or steal from me. He just lied about everything. Who he was, what he wanted, whether he loved me. Turned out I'd been dating a fiction." "What did you do?" "Fell apart for about 6 months. Stopped eating. Stopped sleeping. Threw myself into work because work was the only thing that made sense. Patients have real problems. Broken bones, infections, actual life-threatening emergencies. Made my problems feel manageable by comparison. Did it work? Eventually, but I skipped the feeling part. Just went straight from devastated to functional without processing anything in between. Took about a year before it all caught up with me. Had a panic attack in the middle of a shift. Thought I was having a heart attack. Turned out it was just every emotion I'd been avoiding hitting me at once. That sounds terrible. It was, but it was also necessary. Had to feel it to move past it. That's why I'm telling you, don't make my mistake. Don't wait until your body forces you to process. Do it deliberately, slowly, with support. Is that why you're here? Providing support. She met my eyes, held them. I'm here because I like you. Because I think you're handling an impossible situation with more grace than most people could manage. Because I remember what it's like to feel like you're drowning and have someone throw you a rope. She paused. And yeah, maybe because I find you attractive and interesting and I'm curious where this could go, but mostly the first things. I didn't know what to say. Wasn't sure how to respond to that kind of honesty. I'm not ready for anything, I said finally. A relationship, I mean. I'm barely functional. Still legally married. Still fighting with my ex. Still living in someone else's apartment surrounded by boxes. I know I'm not asking for anything. Just offering friendship, coffee, occasional check-ins to make sure you're eating and sleeping and not letting your surgical wound get infected. If it becomes something else later, great. If not, also great. That's simple? That's simple. Life's complicated enough without making the simple things hard. We talked for 2 hours about nothing important about everything. She told me about her job, about difficult patients and miraculous recoveries and the strange intimacy of caring for people at their most vulnerable. I told her about building the company, about late nights debugging code, about the strange satisfaction of solving impossible problems. We didn't talk about Sarah. Didn't talk about the divorce or the settlement or any of it. Gave that part of my life a rest. When we finally left, the sun had set and the street was dark except for pools of light from street lamps. Walk you to your car? I asked. I took the bus. Walk me to the stop. We walked slowly, not holding hands, not touching, just walking side by side in comfortable silence. At the bus stop, she turned to face me. This was nice. Let's do it again. I'd like that. Good. Now go home. Take your medication. And get some rest. You're still healing. Yes, ma'am. She smiled. Stop calling me ma'am. Makes me feel old. What should I call you? Rachel works fine. The bus arrived. She climbed on, waved through the window. I watched it pull away, carrying her into the night, and felt something in my chest that might have been hope. I walked back to Tom's apartment, let myself in quietly. He'd gone out, giving me privacy. Stood in the guest room, surrounded by boxes containing my former life. Tomorrow, I'd look at apartments, start building a new space, a new life. Tomorrow, the legal fight with Sarah would continue. More emotions, more arguments, more energy wasted on someone who didn't deserve it. But tonight, right now, I felt something other than anger or grief or exhaustion. I felt possibility. The marriage was over. The company was sold. The immediate crisis had passed. What came next was unknown, scary, full of potential for more hurt, but also full of potential for something better, for healing, for growth, for becoming someone new, someone stronger, someone who'd survived betrayal and came out the other side not broken, but rebuilt. I took my medication, checked my incision one last time. Pink and healing, barely even sore anymore. Lay down in bed and closed my eyes. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own complications, but I'd face them because that's what you do when someone tries to destroy you and fails. You wake up. You keep moving. You build something new from the rubble. And eventually, when you're ready, you let yourself be happy again. Not yet, but soon. The apartment viewing was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the morning. I arrived 15 minutes early, standing on the sidewalk outside the building, studying it the way you'd study a person you're considering trusting. 3 stories, red brick, probably built in the 1920s, judging by the architectural details. Fire escapes zigzag down the front facade. Trees line the street, their branches still mostly bare, but showing the first hints of spring green. The neighborhood was quiet, residential. A coffee shop on the corner, a small grocery store across the street, a park visible 2 blocks down. The kind of place where people lived lives instead of performing them. Nothing like the apartment Sarah and I had shared. That building had been all glass and steel and status signaling. This was brick in history and the comfortable wear of time. The leasing agent arrived exactly on time. A woman in her 50s named Patricia, who had the efficient warmth of someone who'd spent decades helping people find homes. You must be Daniel, she said, shaking my hand. Ready to take a look? The building's entrance was modest. A small lobby with mailboxes and a staircase. No elevator, no door, man. No marble floors or designer lighting. I liked it immediately. We climbed to the 3rd floor. Patricia unlocked the door to Unit 3B and stepped aside to let me enter first. The apartment was exactly as the photos had shown, but better somehow. The hardwood floors caught morning light from the east-facing windows and glowed honey. The exposed brick wall in the living room had character. Not the trendy design kind, but the real kind that came from age and history. Built in 1924, Patricia said, following my gaze. Used to be a textile factory converted to residential in the 80s. These units have a lot of original features. The brick, the floors, the windows, but everything functional has been updated. Plumbing, electrical, heating, and cooling. I walked through the space slowly. The living room was open and bright. The kitchen was small but well designed. Everything within reach, efficient without feeling cramped. The bedroom was at the back, quieter with windows overlooking a courtyard and the balcony. Small like the listing had said, but perfect, just big enough for a chair and a tiny table. I stepped out onto it, felt the morning air, looked down at the street below. I could see myself here, could imagine coffee in the morning, watching the neighborhood wake up. Could imagine reading on this balcony in the evenings, letting the day settle. Could imagine healing here. What do you think? Patricia asked from the doorway. I'll take it, she blinked. Don't you want to see the rest? The bathroom? The closets? Check the water pressure. I'm sure it's fine. When can I move in? Well, there's an application process. Credit check, references, proof of income. I can pay a year in advance. Cash today. Her expression shifted, became more cautious. Mr. Mitchell, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but we still need to go through proper procedures. Background check at minimum. It's policy. Of course, I understand. But if everything checks out, and it will, I'd like to move in as soon as possible. She studied me for a moment. I wondered what she saw. A man too eager? Someone running from something? Or just someone tired of living out of boxes in someone else's space? The apartment is available immediately, she said finally. If your application is approved, you could move in this weekend. Perfect. We went back to her office. I filled out paperwork, provided references. Tom, our business lawyer, even my old college roommate, who I hadn't talked to in years, but who'd probably vouch for me anyway. Gave her bank statements showing I could afford 50 years of rent if necessary. She processed everything with professional efficiency. Asked the standard questions about pets and smoking and noise complaints. Looked increasingly convinced that I was legitimate despite my eagerness. One question, she said, reviewing my application. You listed your current address as temporary. Are you in between places? Recently separated, living with a friend while I sort things out. Ah. Her expression softened. That explains it. You need your own space to process everything. Exactly. Well, barring any surprises in the background check, and I don't anticipate any, you should hear from me by tomorrow afternoon. If approved, we can schedule a move-in date. I left her office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The apartment wasn't just a place to sleep. It was a declaration, a line drawn between the life I'd had and the life I was building. My phone rang as I walked back to Tom's place. Sarah's lawyer. I considered not answering. Let it go to voicemail. Let my own lawyer handle it. But curiosity won. This is Daniel. Mr. Mitchell, this is Jennifer Hartley representing Sarah Mitchell. I wanted to reach out directly before we proceed with formal motions. We have lawyers for a reason. This conversation should go through them. I understand, but sometimes direct communication can resolve issues more efficiently than courtroom battles. My client is willing to negotiate. The settlement was the negotiation. She signed it. Under circumstances my client felt were coercive. She was stranded in a foreign country, exhausted from travel, under significant emotional distress. She was offered a choice. Sign or find other accommodations. That's not coercion. That's consequences. Mr. Mitchell, I'm trying to find middle ground here. My client acknowledges that emotions ran high. She's willing to return the funds as agreed, but she's asking for flexibility on the timeline, 90 days instead of 30, and she'd like the language about business assets removed. She doesn't want to claim anything from your company sale, just needs more time to gather the funds. I stopped walking, stood on the sidewalk while people flowed around me. Sarah was backing down, not completely but significantly, was trying to save face while accepting defeat. The smart move was to take the deal, extend the timeline, remove the redundant language about business assets. I'd already protected those through other means anyway. Get my money back and end this. But something in me resisted, not logic, something deeper. The part that remembered standing in the cabin abandoned and in pain. The part that remembered Sarah laughing as she drove away. 30 days, I said. As agreed, and all other terms remain unchanged. She signed the agreement willingly. If she has trouble gathering funds, She can sell possessions, jewelry, her car, the expensive clothes she bought with it for savings. Mr. Mitchell, those are my terms. She wants to renegotiate. She can start by acknowledging what she did. Not just returning stolen money as a negotiating tactic. Actually admitting she was wrong. Actually apologizing. That's not a reasonable request for a legal settlement. Then I guess we'll see each other in court. I hung up immediately. Wondered if I just made a terrible mistake. Let ego override sense. Chosen pride over pragmatism. My phone rang again. Tom, I just got a call from Sarah's lawyer. He said, they're trying to renegotiate. Did they contact you? Just hung up with her. And I said, no. Silence on the other end. Then want to tell me why? Because it's not about the money anymore. It's about her admitting what she did. Taking responsibility. Daniel, I know. I know it's emotional instead of rational. I know I should take the deal and move on, but I can't. Not yet. Not until she acknowledges that what she did was wrong. More silence. Then Tom sighed. Okay, I get it. But you need to be prepared for this to drag on. Months, maybe. More legal fees, more stress, more energy spent on someone who doesn't deserve it. I know. And you need to ask yourself if it's worth it. If making Sarah admit she was wrong is worth delaying your own healing. I don't know if it's worth it, but I know I can't let this go. Not yet. After we hung up, I kept walking past Tom's building, past the coffee shop where I'd met Rachel, past the bus stop where we'd said goodbye. Walking without destination, just moving because moving felt better than standing still. My phone buzzed. Text from Rachel. How'd the apartment viewing go? Good. Really good. I think I found a place. That's great. When can you move in? This weekend if the application is approved, which it should be. Exciting new beginning. Yeah. Feels weird though. Like I'm starting over at 35. Starting over at any age is brave. Most people just keep living in situations that hurt them because change is scary. You're actually doing something about it. Or I'm running away. There's a difference between running away and walking towards something better. Sounds like you're doing the second one. I stopped walking, sat on a bench in a small park I hadn't realized I'd reached. Watched children play on a playground while their parents watched from nearby benches. Normal life. Regular problems. Kids who needed pushing on swings. Parents who were tired but present. No betrayal. No theft. No dramatic confrontations in tropical resorts. Or maybe they had their own versions of that. Maybe every person in this park was carrying something heavy. Maybe everyone was fighting battles I couldn't see from the outside. You free tonight? I typed to Rachel. Depends. What did you have in mind? Nothing fancy. Maybe take a walk. I need to get out of my head. Meet you at the park on 7th at 6 o'clock. Perfect. The day passed in administrative tasks. I called my car insurance company, reported that Sarah still had my vehicle, started the process of getting it returned or compensated. Called the moving company Tom had recommended, scheduled them for Saturday morning, assuming the apartment application went through. Organized my belongings, the boxes from the storage unit, the items I'd recovered from the apartment. Made a list of what was missing, what was damaged, what I'd need to replace. The guitar went into its case. I'd take it to a repair shop once I moved. See if it could be fixed or if I needed to accept that some things, once broken, stayed broken. My grandmother's dishes, most were cracked or chipped. I kept them anyway. Evidence for the legal case, yes, but also because they were hers. Because some things mattered beyond their monetary value. At 5:30, I changed clothes. Nothing fancy. Jeans, a sweater, comfortable shoes for walking. Checked my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized the person looking back. Thinner, the stress and recovery had stripped weight I couldn't afford to lose. Dark circles under the eyes from too many nights of interrupted sleep, but also something else. Something harder around the jaw. Something more defined in the eyes. I looked like someone who'd been through something, someone who'd survived. At 6 exactly, I arrived at the park. Rachel was already there, sitting on a bench near the entrance, wearing running shoes and a jacket despite the warming weather. Ready to walk? She asked. Ready? We walked without talking at first, just moving through the park, past the playground, along the path that wound through trees, and around a small pond. The evening was mild, pleasant. Other people were out, joggers, dog walkers, couples holding hands. So Rachel said eventually want to talk about what's bothering you or walk in therapeutic silence. How do you know something's bothering me? You texted me asking to walk. In my experience, people only do that when they need to process something. So talk or silence. Sarah's lawyer called once to renegotiate the settlement, extend the timeline, soften the terms, and you said no. Why? Because she hasn't admitted she was wrong, hasn't apologized, just wants to modify terms that are inconvenient for her. Rachel was quiet for a moment. We passed the pond, watched ducks glide across the surface. Can I be honest? She asked. Always. You're holding on to anger, using it as fuel. It's working, keeping you functional, giving you purpose, but eventually it's going to burn out and leave you empty. You sound like Tom. Tom sounds smart. Look, I get Ed. What Sarah did was terrible. She deserves consequences. But at some point, you have to ask yourself, what are you actually getting from this? Is making her admit guilt worth the energy it's costing you? Maybe not. But letting her off easy feels like betraying myself, like saying what she did was acceptable. There's a middle path between letting her off easy and burning yourself out trying to force an apology. You can enforce consequences without making it your life's mission. We walked another lap around the pond. I thought about what she was saying, knew she was right logically. But logic and emotion were different languages, and emotion was screaming louder. I found an apartment, I said, changing the subject. 3rd floor walk up, hardwood floors, small balcony. Yeah, tell me about it. I described it. The brick wall, the light, the quiet neighborhood, the sense that I could actually live there instead of just existing. Sounds perfect, she said. When do you move in? Saturday, probably if the application is approved. Need help? I'm off Saturday afternoon. Could bring boxes up 3 flights of stairs. Consider it my cardio for the day. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. Unless you're the kind of person who insists on doing everything alone to prove some kind of point about independence. I might be that kind of person. Well, stop. Let people help you. It doesn't make you weak. We walked until the sun started setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple until the park started emptying. Families heading home for dinner. Joggers completing final laps. I should get going, Rachel said. Early shift tomorrow. Thank you for this, for listening. Anytime, she paused. Daniel, one more thing. You're doing better than you think. You've been through hell and you're still standing. That counts for something. She left before I could respond. I watched her go, then sat on a bench as the light faded, thinking about everything she'd said. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was holding on to anger because it felt safer than grief. Easier to be furious than heartbroken. But eventually, I'd have to let it go. Eventually, I'd have to choose between revenge and recovery. Not tonight, but soon. The apartment application was approved on Thursday. I moved in on Saturday morning with Tom's help, Rachel's help, and a moving crew that seemed amused by how few possessions I actually had. 6 boxes of books, 4 boxes of clothes, kitchen items, the broken guitar, my father's skillet carefully wrapped and carried by hand, a life compressed into 10 boxes, and a few pieces of furniture. Tom had insisted on buying me a bed, a couch, a small dining table. You can't eat standing over the sink like a college student, he'd said. You're a millionaire now. Act like it. By noon, everything was in place. The movers left. Tom ran out to get pizza. Rachel was arranging books on the shelf I'd assembled that morning, organizing them by some system I didn't understand, but looked intentional. I stood in the middle of my new living room, looking at the space that was mine. Only mine. No shared history, no ghosts of arguments, no memories of a marriage slowly dying, just empty space waiting to be filled with whatever came next. It's a good space, Rachel said, stepping back to admire her organizational work. Feels like you. Quiet, but not empty. Substantial. I don't know if I have a feels like me anymore. Feels like I'm still figuring out who that is. That's okay. Most people never figure it out. At least you are asking the question. Tom returned with 3 pizza boxes. Too much food for 3 people. But that was Tom's way. Go big or don't bother. We ate sitting on the floor because I didn't have proper furniture yet. Passing around paper plates and napkins, talking about nothing important. It felt normal. Startlingly, unexpectedly normal, like maybe I was capable of having normal moments again. Simple pleasures that weren't complicated by betrayal or legal warfare or the grinding machinery of divorce. So, what's next? Tom asked, finishing his 3rd slice. You've got a place. Got money in the bank. Got friends who tolerate you. What's the plan? Honestly, I don't know. Thought I'd figured out my life, career, marriage, trajectory. Turns out I hadn't figured out anything. None of us have. We're all just improvising and hoping it looks intentional. He paused. But seriously, what do you want? Not what you think you should want. What actually matters to you? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Peace, I said finally. I want to wake up and not immediately think about Sarah. Want to go a whole day without anger. Want to feel like I'm building something instead of defending against something. That's good, Rachel said quietly. That's healthy. But I'm not there yet. Still too angry. Still too focused on making sure she pays for what she did. She is paying, Tom pointed out. The settlement, the damaged career. Marcus probably blames her for his legal troubles. She lost a lot, Daniel. Maybe not everything you wanted her to lose, but enough. Is it enough, though? She hasn't admitted she was wrong. Hasn't apologized? Just keeps fighting? Keeps trying to negotiate? Keeps acting like she's the victim. Rachel set down her pizza. Can I tell you something from experience? Waiting for someone to admit they wronged you is like waiting for a train that's not coming. They have too much invested in their own narrative. Admitting guilt would mean acknowledging they're not who they think they are. Most people can't handle that level of self-awareness. So, I just accept that she'll never take responsibility. You accept that her taking responsibility has nothing to do with your healing. You got justice through the legal system. You protected yourself financially. You enforced consequences. Whether she admits fault or apologizes, that's about her conscience, not your recovery. I knew she was right. Had known it for a while, actually. But hearing it out loud in this new space that wasn't contaminated by my history with Sarah made it feel more true. How do I let it go? I asked. You decide that moving forward matters more than looking back. That building a new life is more important than punishing the old one. Tom's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression changed. Got serious. Daniel, you need to see this. He handed me his phone. Email from my lawyer. Subject line settlement update. I opened it. Daniel, Sarah's attorney, contacted me this afternoon with a new proposal. Sarah is willing to pay the full $48,000 within the 30-day timeline as agreed. Additionally, she's offering to sign a statement acknowledging that she took the funds without your consent and that her actions were wrong. She's also agreeing to cover all your legal fees related to the divorce proceedings. This is a significant concession. I recommend accepting. While we could continue fighting, this gives you everything the settlement originally demanded, plus the acknowledgement you wanted. Advise on how you'd like to proceed. I read it twice, then handed the phone back to Tom. She's surrendering, I said. Looks like it. Question is, are you ready to accept surrender? Was I? I'd been fighting for so long that accepting victory felt strange, anticlimactic, like the story was ending without a proper climax. But maybe that's how real life worked. Maybe not every conflict ended with dramatic confrontation. Maybe sometimes people just stopped fighting, admitted defeat quietly, moved on. Tell her I accept, I said. All terms. End it. Tom nodded, started typing a response to my lawyer. Rachel touched my arm. How do you feel? I don't know. Relieved, disappointed, both. Victory doesn't always feel victorious. Especially when what you won was just not losing everything. Poetic. True, though. We finished the pizza. Tom left around 3, claiming he had plans, but probably just wanting to give Rachel and me space. Rachel stayed, helped me unpack boxes, hung pictures on the walls, prints I'd bought from a local artist. Nothing expensive, just images that felt calming. A forest scene, a mountain landscape, a seascape at sunset. No photos? She asked, noticing the absence of personal pictures. Don't have many. Sarah took most of them. The ones of us together. Didn't want to keep those anyway. What about family? Friends? My parents are dead. Father died 5 years ago. Mother when I was a kid. No siblings. Tom's the closest thing I have to family. That's sad. It's just facts. Can't miss what you never had. She gave me a look that suggested she didn't believe that, but didn't push. By evening, the apartment looked lived in. Books on shelves, clothes in the closet, kitchen organized. My father's skillet hanging on a hook by the stove. I'd never use it probably, but having it visible felt important. Rachel and I sat on the balcony as the sun set, drinking cheap wine from the grocery store, watching the street below as neighbors came home from work, as lights turned on in windows, as the day transitioned into night. This is nice, she said. Peaceful. Yeah. You going to be okay here alone? I think so. Spent too long not being alone. Need to remember how to be comfortable with myself. That's wise. A lot of people jump from relationship to relationship because they can't handle their own company. Is that a subtle way of telling me not to get involved with anyone too quickly? She smiled. Maybe. Or maybe it's a less subtle way of saying I'm interested but patient. I can wait until you're ready, if you're ever ready. And if I'm not, then we stay friends. I'm not going to pressure you, Daniel. You've been through enough pressure. We sat in comfortable silence as darkness settled over the city. I thought about everything that had happened since that morning in the cabin. The abandonment, the theft, the fight back, the slow, grinding process of enforcing consequences and protecting myself. I'd won in every way that mattered. I'd won. Sarah would pay back the money, would acknowledge her wrongdoing, would cover my legal fees, would face the consequences of her choices, damaged career, failed relationship with Marcus, the knowledge that she'd gambled everything on a fantasy and lost. I had money, had freedom, had a new home and new possibilities. But I didn't feel triumphant. Didn't feel the satisfaction I'd expected. Just tired and ready to stop fighting. I'm going to drop the contest, I said suddenly. Rachel looked at me. What contest? Sarah's lawyer has been fighting the settlement, claiming duress. My lawyer wants to drag it through court, make an example, but I'm going to tell her to accept Sarah's offer, take the acknowledgement and the money, and end it. Why the change of heart? Because I'm tired. Because you're right. Holding on to anger isn't sustainable. Because I want to wake up tomorrow and think about something other than how much I hate my ex-wife. That's growth. That's exhaustion. Sometimes they're the same thing. My phone buzzed at a text from Tom. Lawyer confirmed. Sarah's signing the addendum tomorrow. You'll have the money by end of next week. Congratulations, you survived. I showed Rachel the message. How does it feel? She asked. Weird. Anticlimactic. Like I prepared for a war and got a negotiated surrender instead. Most wars end that way, with paperwork and signatures instead of dramatic final battles. Doesn't make for a good story. Makes for a better life, though. We stayed on the balcony until the wine was gone and the street was quiet until Rachel said she should get home early shift tomorrow. Needed sleep. I walked her to the door. She paused in the doorway. Daniel, one more thing. You did good. You protected yourself without becoming cruel. You enforced consequences without losing yourself. That's harder than it sounds. Doesn't feel like I did good. Feels like I just survived. Survival is good. Survival is the foundation everything else is built on. She left. I closed the door and stood in my new apartment, listening to the silence. It was different from the silence in the cabin that had been isolating, threatening. This was peaceful, safe. I thought about Sarah. Wondered how she was feeling right now. If she regretted what she'd done, if she understood the magnitude of what she'd lost. Not just the money, but the opportunity for the life we could have built together. If she'd been honest about her unhappiness. Probably not. People rarely understand their own mistakes in real time. Usually took years of distance and perspective. Maybe she'd figure it out eventually. Maybe she'd look back and realize that stealing $48,000 had cost her access to $2 million. That abandoning someone after surgery had destroyed any chance of an amicable divorce. That choosing Marcus had meant losing not just a husband but the stability, partnership, and future they'd been building. Or maybe she'd never figure it out, would rewrite the story in her head, make herself the victim, blame me for everything that went wrong. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. I was done carrying her choices, done letting her actions define my life, done being the person she'd tried to break. I walked through my new apartment one last time before bed, checked the locks, adjusted the curtain, set my coffee maker to brew automatically in the morning. Simple actions, normal actions, the building blocks of a regular life. In the bedroom, I unpacked the last box. Found a framed photo I'd forgotten I had. Me and my father at the cabin taken years ago. I was maybe 25. He was healthy then, strong, smiling at the camera with that quiet confidence he'd always had. I set it on the nightstand, looked at it for a moment. I survived it, I said to the photo, to him, to the memory of the man who taught me about self-reliance and quiet strength. Just like you knew I would. The photo didn't answer, but I felt something settle anyway. Some sense that I'd passed a test, that I'd been broken and had put myself back together differently than before, but whole. I lay down in my new bed in my new home, and waited for sleep. Tomorrow would bring the final signatures, the official end, the closing of a chapter that had been painful and transformative and necessary. And then what? Then I'd figure out how to be happy, how to build a life based on what I wanted instead of what I was fighting against. How to be someone who'd been hurt but hadn't let hurt define them. Then I'd wake up and not think about Sarah. Would drink coffee on my balcony. Would maybe text Rachel and see if she wanted to get dinner. Would call Tom and thank him for everything. Would take my broken guitar to the repair shop and see if it could be fixed. Would start treating each day as a beginning instead of a recovery. Would learn how to live instead of just survive. Outside the city hummed with life. Millions of people with their own stories, their own betrayals, their own battles with whether to choose anger or healing. I chose healing not because I was noble near enlightened, but because anger was exhausting and I was tired of being tired. I closed my eyes. Somewhere in the darkness, I felt the weight begin to lift. Not all at once, not completely, but enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to hope. Enough to believe that what came next might actually be better than what came before. The incision had healed. The apartment was mine. The money was coming back. The justice was served. Now came the harder part. Now came living. But I was ready. Or I would be soon. 3 months later, I sat on my balcony with morning coffee, watching the neighborhood wake up. The trees were fully green now. Summer had arrived, gentle and warm. Rachel sat across from me, still in pajamas, reading something on her phone and occasionally laughing at whatever she found amusing. We'd been together, officially together, for 6 weeks, slowly, carefully, with both of us aware that I was still healing from wounds that went deeper than surgery. It was working. We were working. The divorce had finalized a month ago. Sarah had signed everything, paid everything, disappeared into whatever life she was building with Marcus or without him. I didn't know and didn't care. Tom had started a new company, had asked if I wanted in. I'd said maybe. Wanted time to figure out what I actually wanted instead of just rebuilding what had been taken. My guitar was fixed, played beautifully. The repair shop had done something magical. Made it sound even better than before. Sometimes things broken and repaired were stronger than things that had never been tested. What are you thinking about? Rachel asked, looking up from her phone. How strange it is that the worst thing that ever happened to me led to this, to you, to this moment. Life's weird that way. Sometimes you have to lose everything to figure out what actually matters. What matters this? She gestured at the balcony. The coffee, the quiet morning, simple things, peace, people who don't lie to you. That's a low bar. It's the important bar. My phone buzzed. Email from my lawyer. Final confirmation that all divorce proceedings were complete. All financial obligations satisfied, all legal ties severed. I deleted it without responding. That chapter was over. This one was just beginning. And for the first time in years, I was genuinely curious about what came next. Not afraid, not braced for betrayal.
That brings this story to an end, and that one was definitely a wild ride. Let me know what you think in the comments. Now, let's move into the next story, titled,
At Christmas dinner, my 9-year-old son was given a plate of cold leftovers while everyone else ate a full hot holiday meal. They told him to be grateful. Everyone pretended nothing was wrong. He tugged my sleeve and whispered, Dad, can you do the thing you promised if they hurt me again? So I did. 5 minutes later, my mother-in-law turned white, my brother shouted at me, and the entire table erupted in chaos. Harry Rose stood in the doorway of his repair shop, watching the last streaks of October sunlight fade over Cedar Bluff's main street. The air carried that particular Wisconsin chill that cut through flannel and settled into your bones. He wiped his hands on a rag stained with 12 years of engine oil and transmission fluid. The kind of stain that never quite washes out no matter how hard you scrub. 12 years of marriage. 12 years of trying to be enough for a woman whose mother had spent every single one of those years making sure he knew he wasn't. The bells above the shop door chimed as he locked up for the evening. His truck sat in the gravel lot, rusted at the wheel wells, but reliable. That was Harry in a nutshell. He supposed not flashy, not impressive by Lorraine Fallon standards, but he showed up every day and did the work. He paid his bills. He took care of his son. He fixed what was broken, at least when it came to engines and transmissions and electrical systems that made sense. People were harder to fix, especially when they didn't think they were broken. Harry drove through town with his windows cracked, letting the cold air keep him alert. Cedar Bluff was the kind of place where everyone knew your name and half your business before you did. The hardware store owner waved from his porch. Mrs. Patterson from the diner gave him a nod as she flipped her sign to closed. This was home had been since he was born and he never wanted to leave it. He'd met Amelia at the summer festival 13 years ago. She'd been visiting from Madison, staying with her aunt for the season, and Harry had thought she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Dark hair that caught the light, a laugh that sounded like music, and a way of looking at him that made him feel like maybe he was worth looking at. They'd married fast, too fast, probably. But Harry had been young and in love, and he'd thought that was enough. It wasn't until after the wedding that he'd really gotten to know Lorraine. The first time she'd come to visit their small apartment, she'd walk through it with her lips pressed into a thin line, touching things with just her fingertips as if she might catch something. Well, she'd said finally, settling on their second-hand couch with visible reluctance. I suppose it's cozy. You'll want something bigger once you get a real career going, Harry. He'd laugh it off then. Made a joke about how he was still figuring things out. Amelia had squeezed his hand and changed the subject, and he'd thought that was the end of it. But Lorraine's comments never ended. They just evolved, sharpened, found new soft places to land. When Harry opened his repair shop, working 16-hour days to get off the ground, Lorraine had said, "A mechanic. Well, someone has to do that kind of work, I suppose." When he'd finally started turning a profit, paying off his business loan, she'd said, "It's nice that you're self-employed. No corporate ladder to worry about climbing." When Michael was born and Harry had held his son in the hospital, crying from sheer overwhelming love, Lorraine had said, "I hope he has Amelia's drive. Boys need ambition." Every comment had a smile attached to it. Every insult came wrapped in concern. And Amelia always had the same response. "That's just how she is. She doesn't mean anything by it." Harry pulled into their driveway. It was a small house, but it was theirs. He'd repaired every inch of it himself over the years. Fixed the porch steps, replaced the water heater, rewired the kitchen, made it safe and warm and good enough for his family. Never good enough for Lorraine. The front door opened before he could reach it. Michael stood there 8 years old and small for his age, with Amelia's dark hair and Harry's gray eyes. His face lit up when he saw his father. "Dad, you're home." Harry scooped him up even though the kid was getting heavy. "Hey buddy, good day at school. I got a 100 on my spelling test." "That's my boy." Harry sat him down and ruffled his hair. "Where's your mom?" "On the phone with Grandma." Michael's voice went a little quieter. "She's been on there a while." Harry could hear Amelia's voice from the kitchen. That particular tone she used only when talking to her mother. Appeasing, apologetic, a little desperate for approval that never quite came. He hung up his jacket and followed Michael into the living room where the boy had his homework spread across the coffee table. Harry knelt down beside him, looking over the math problems. "Need help with anything?" "No, I got it." Michael chewed his pencil, concentrating hard. Then, without looking up, he said, "Grandma's coming for Thanksgiving." Something cold settled in Harry's stomach. "Yeah, your mom mentioned that. She said it'll be nice. Family time." Michael glanced up at him and there was something in his eyes that an 8-year-old shouldn't have. "Weariness." She said, "I need to be on my best behavior." "You're always on your best behavior." "Grandma doesn't think so." Harry opened his mouth to respond, but Amelia's voice cut through from the kitchen. "Harry, can you come here?" He squeezed Michael's shoulder and stood. In the kitchen, Amelia was leaning against the counter with her phone in her hand, looking tired. She was still beautiful, still the woman he'd fallen in love with. But there were lines around her eyes now that hadn't been there a few years ago. Stress lines, tension. "Mom wants to do Thanksgiving at her place this year," she said before he could even say hello. "I told her that would be fine." Harry crossed his arms, leaning against the door frame. "Did you ask me first?" "It's Thanksgiving, Harry. We always do holidays with family. We did Thanksgiving there last year and a year before and a year before that." Amelia's jaw tightened. "What's your point?" "My point is that every time we go there, your mother find a way to make Michael feel small. Last time she told him his handwriting looked like a first grader's. The time before that, she said he was too skinny and needed to play more sports. She's just trying to help him improve." Harry laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's not help. That's criticism dressed up as concern. You're being sensitive. I'm being protective. There's a difference." He kept his voice low, aware that Michael could probably hear them. "Every time we leave your mother's house, Michael is quieter. He pulls into himself. It takes days before he's back to normal." Amelia set her phone down hard on the counter. "She's his grandmother. She loves him. Then she has a hell of a way of showing it." They stared at each other across the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the wall ticked. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. Finally, Amelia said, "We're going for Thanksgiving. It's already decided." Harry wanted to argue more, wanted to put his foot down, but he could see the set of her shoulders, the stubborn lift of her chin. It was a posture he'd seen 1,000 times, inherited directly from Lorraine. When Amelia decided something, especially something her mother wanted, there was no moving her. "Fine," he said. "But if she starts it on Michael, we're leaving." "She won't. She always does." Amelia turned away from him, starting to pull things from the refrigerator for dinner. "You just need to give her a chance, Harry. She's not as bad as you make her out to be, but she was. She really was." Harry thought back to all the times Lorraine had called him over the years. When she needed her deck renovated and wanted cheap labor. When her car needed repairs and she expected them for free. When she needed someone to move furniture or fix her garbage disposal or install a new ceiling fan. "Harry, can you help with this? Harry, you're so handy." Harry, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. He always went, always helped. Always did the work without complaint. And she still talked about him like he was a disappointment her daughter had settled for. He remembered the day Michael had won the school science fair. The kid had worked for weeks on a project about renewable energy, staying up late with Harry to build a working model wind turbine. When he placed first in his grade, Harry had been so proud he nearly burst. He called everyone he knew, posted pictures, made Michael's favorite dinner to celebrate. Lorraine had come over that evening. She'd looked at the trophy, smiled that thin smile of hers, and said, "Well, good for him, but let's not exaggerate. It's a small school. He's not exactly competing with the best and brightest." The light had died in Michael's eyes instantly. Amelia had laughed nervously and said, "Mom, he worked really hard on it." "I'm sure he did. I'm just saying we should keep things in perspective." Lorraine had patted Michael's head like he was a puppy who'd done a cute trick. No need to give him a big head about it. Harry had excused himself to the garage after that. He'd stood in the dark, hands shaking, wanted to go back inside and tell Lorraine exactly what he thought of her parenting philosophy. But Amelia had come out and asked him to please not make a scene. Her mother didn't mean it the way it sounded. Couldn't he just let it go this once? He let it go. It let a lot of things go over the years. But every time he let something go, a little piece of his marriage went with it. A little more distance opened up between him and Amelia. She kept choosing her mother over him, over Michael, over the family they'd built together. And Harry kept swallowing his anger, his hurt, his growing certainty that this couldn't last forever. That evening after dinner, Harry sat with Michael on the back porch. The November air was sharp and clean. The stars were coming out, bright pin pricks against the darkening sky. Michael leaned against him, and Harry put his arm around his son's thin shoulders. "Dad." "Yeah, buddy. If Grandma says something mean again at Thanksgiving, will you stand up for me?" Harry's throat tightened. He thought about all the promises he'd made as a father. To protect his son, to keep him safe, to make sure he grew up knowing he was valued and loved and good enough exactly as he was. "Yes," he said. "I promise." Michael relaxed against him. "Okay, I believe you." Harry stared up at the stars and wondered how much longer he could keep that promise while still keeping his marriage intact. Wondered if maybe those two things were mutually exclusive now. Wondered when exactly the woman he'd married had become so much like the woman who'd raised her. Inside he could hear Amelia on the phone again. Her mother's voice was loud enough to carry through the walls, talking about something that required Amelia's complete agreement and attention. It always did. Harry closed his eyes and held his son a little tighter. The cold Wisconsin wind picked up, rattling the bare tree branches. Winter was coming early this year. He could feel it in the air. That particular quality of approaching frost. The kind of cold that got into everything and didn't let go until spring. The kind you had to either endure or escape from entirely. Thanksgiving arrived like an obligation Harry couldn't shake. He'd spent the week leading up to it with a knot in his stomach that no amount of antacids could touch. Michael had been quiet, withdrawing into himself the way he always did before family gatherings at the Fallon house. Amelia had been short with both of them, stressed about making sure everything was perfect. Everything was just the way her mother expected. The drive to Lorraine's house took 40 minutes. She lived in a larger home on the outskirts of town, the kind of place with a manicured lawn and expensive landscaping that she paid other people to maintain. Her late husband had left her comfortable, and she made sure everyone knew it. The house itself was nice enough, Victorian style with a wraparound porch, but Harry had never felt welcome there. It was like entering a museum where you were expected to keep your hands to yourself and your voice down. Heath's truck was already in the driveway. Amelia's brother still lived in the basement apartment their mother had converted for him years ago. He was 36 now, had never held a job longer than 6 months, and Lorraine still treated him like he was one bad break away from becoming successful. Harry had a different theory about what Heath was one bad break away from. But he kept those thoughts to himself. They parked and gathered their things. Amelia had made 2 pies from scratch because Lorraine had mentioned she preferred homemade desserts. Michael clutched a construction paper turkey he'd made in art class and Harry could see his hands shaking slightly. "It'll be fine," Amelia said more to herself into them. She checked her reflection in the car window, smoothing her hair. "Just a few hours. We can do this." Harry took Michael's hand as they walked up to the house. The boy's palm was clammy with nervous sweat. Before they could knock, the door swung open. Lorraine stood there in a cream-colored sweater and pearls. Her silver hair perfectly styled. She was in her early 60s, but could have passed for younger. She worked at it. Harry knew regular salon visits, expensive skin creams, a personal trainer twice a week. All of it designed to maintain the image of a woman who had everything together. "There you are. Her smile was bright but didn't quite reach her eyes. Come in. Come in. You're right on time. She hugged Amelia first, tight and possessive, then gave Harry a brief nod that acknowledged his existence without actually welcoming it. When she turned to Michael, her smile faltered slightly. Hello, Michael. You're still so small for your age, aren't you? The boy's shoulders hunched. Harry felt his jaw clench. He's growing just fine, Harry said evenly. Of course, of course. Lorraine ushered them inside. The house smelled like roasted turkey and something floral from one of her many candles. Heath is already here. He's been helping me with dinner. Such a good son. The implication hung in the air. Such a good son. Unlike the son-in-law who does manual labor and doesn't make enough money. The living room was warm, almost too warm. Heath was sprawled on the couch watching football, a beer already in his hand despite it being barely noon. He glanced up when they entered, his eyes lingering on Harry with poorly disguised dislike. Harry, he said, not bothering to get up. Heath, game's tied. Vikings are choking as usual. Harry didn't respond. He'd learned years ago that engaging with Heath was pointless. The man had built his entire personality around being Lorraine's favorite child. The one who could do no wrong despite doing nothing at all. Michael tried to hand his grandmother the paper turkey he'd made. I made this for you in our class. Lorraine took it between two fingers, holding it away from her body like it might stain her sweater. How creative. We'll find a place for it somewhere. She sat on a side table, already dismissing it. Now, why don't you children make yourselves comfortable while I finish up in the kitchen? Amelia, dear, can you help me? Amelia followed her mother without question, leaving Harry and Michael alone with Heath. The three of them sat in uncomfortable silence. The football game played on, announcers discussing plays and statistics. Michael stayed close to Harry, pressed against his side on the love seat. Heath drank his beer and occasionally made comments about the game that no one responded to. From the kitchen, Harry could hear the murmur of voices. Lorraine's tone was sugary with that particular edge she got when she was being subtly critical. Amelia's responses were quiet, agreeable. He'd heard variations of his conversation 100 times. Lorraine offering advice that wasn't really advice. Amelia accepting criticism disguised as concern. Your boy doesn't talk much, does he? Heath said suddenly. Harry looked at him. He talks when he has something to say. Mom says he's too soft. Says Amelia coddles him too much. Heath took another drink. Boys need to be tougher. My dad would have straightened him out if he was still around. Good thing he's not your son then. Heath's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? It means Michael is fine the way he is. He doesn't need to be anything other than himself. He needs to be a man, not some sensitive little kid who cries when things get hard. Harry felt heat rising in his chest. He's 8. 8 is old enough to know the world doesn't care about your feelings. Heath pointed his beer bottle at Michael. You're doing him no favors, raising him soft. Before Harry could respond, Lorraine appeared in the doorway with a tight smile. Boys, let's keep things pleasant. It's Thanksgiving. Her eyes landed on Harry. Harry, would you mind helping Heath set the table? I'm sure you know how to do that at least. The barb landed perfectly as they always did. Harry stood without comment and followed Heath to the dining room. The table was already mostly set. Crystal glasses, fine china that Lorraine brought out only for holidays, cloth napkins folded into complicated shapes. Heath handed Harry a stack of plates with visible reluctance, as if even that small gesture of cooperation pained him. They worked in silence. The clink of dishes the only sound. Harry thought about Michael sitting alone in the living room, small and uncomfortable, and felt his anger building. This was supposed to be a family holiday. It was supposed to be about gratitude and togetherness. Instead, it was just another opportunity for Lorraine to remind everyone of their place in her hierarchy of worth. Mom says Amelia could have done better, Heath said suddenly, his back to Harry as he arranged silverware. Says she settled because she was young and didn't know any better. Harry set down the plates carefully, keeping his hand steady. Is there a point to this conversation? Point is, you're not family. Not really. You're just a guy who knocked at my sister and stuck around out of obligation. Heath turned, smirking. We all know it. You know it, too. If that's what you need to believe, it's what Mom believes. And Mom's always right. Heath walked past him toward the kitchen, bumping Harry's shoulder deliberately as he went. Harry stood alone in the dining room, staring at the formal table setting, the expensive china, the crystal that probably cost more than he made in a month. None of it meant anything. It was just decoration, just another way for Lorraine to show that she had more, was more than the people around her. He heard Michael's laugh from the living room. A small uncertain sound, and knew his son was trying to make himself invisible, trying to be good enough, quiet enough, small enough not to attract the wrong kind of attention. Harry had been doing the same thing for 12 years. Maybe it was time to stop. Dinner started with surface pleasantries. Lorraine sat at the head of the table, holding court like a queen with her subjects. The turkey was perfectly cooked, the sides arranged artfully on serving platters. Everything looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. Everything felt like a performance. Lorraine served plates with calculated efficiency, heaping generous portions onto everyone's dishes. Everyone except Michael. Harry watched as she reached past the boy to grab a plate from the refrigerator behind her chair, one she'd apparently prepared earlier. She sat in front of Michael with a smile. The food on it was cold, visibly obviously cold. Congealed gravy, hard mashed potatoes, sliced turkey that had been refrigerated until the meat looked pale and unappetizing. Michael stared at it, then looked at his father. "Mom," Amelia said uncertainly. "Is that from earlier?" "It's perfectly good food." Lorraine settled into her chair. Children don't need everything fresh and hot. They should learn to be grateful for what they receive, not picky about how it's served. Heath snorted into his wine glass. "Kids should toughen up anyway. This generation is too soft. When I was his age, I ate what I was given and didn't complain." Harry felt something snap inside him. Not breaking, snapping like a branch under too much weight. Sudden and clean. Michael's small voice cut through the tension. "Dad, you promised. You said you'd stop them if they did it again." The room went silent except for the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Harry looked at his son, 8 years old, small for his age, sensitive and thoughtful and everything good in this world, sitting in front of a cold plate of food while everyone else ate hot meals, being told he should be grateful for the scraps. He stood up. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor, loud in the sudden quiet. He reached across the table, picked up Michael's cold plate, and walked around to Lorraine's end. He set it down directly in front of her, right next to her own heaping plate of steaming food. "You serve this to your grandson," Harry said, his voice steady and calm. "Then you eat it, too." Lorraine's face went red, then white. "Excuse me? You heard me. If it's good enough for an 8-year-old child, it's good enough for you." Heath shot to his feet, his chair nearly toppling backward. "You think you can talk to my mom like that?" Harry turned to face him. For the first time in 12 years, he felt completely calm. Clear, like you've been holding his breath underwater and had finally surfaced. "Heath, sit down. You're a grown man living in your mother's basement. You haven't held a job in 4 years. You survive on her handouts and her tolerance. You don't get to lecture anyone about respect or responsibility or being a man." Heath's mouth opened and closed. His face flushed dark red. "I'm not finished." Harry's voice was still calm, but there was still underneath it now. "You talk about toughening Michael up. You say he needs to learn the world doesn't care about his feelings. But the truth is, you're afraid. Afraid that an 8-year-old boy has more courage and more heart than you've ever had. That he'll grow up to be everything you're not." The silence that followed was absolute. Amelia grabbed Harry's arm, her fingers digging in hard. "Stop it. Stop it right now. You're embarrassing us." "Us?" Harry looked at his wife. "Really?" Looked at her. "When was the last time you stood up for Michael? When was the last time you chose him over your mother? That's not fair." "Fair?" Harry pulled his arm free. "Your mother just served our son a cold plate of food like he's not worth the effort of proper care, and you're worried about being embarrassed." Lorraine stood, her hands flat on the table. When she spoke, her voice was cold enough to freeze fire. "Amelia, do you see what I mean? He's unstable, volatile, and this is the man raising your son." That sentence, those words, that was the moment something fundamental changed in Harry Rowe. He didn't yell, didn't argue. He simply walked to where Michael sat, still staring at the cold plate that had been moved, and picked up the boy's jacket from the back of his chair. "Get your things, buddy. We're leaving." "Harry, you can't just," Amelia started. "Watch me." He helped Michael into his jacket. The boy's hands shaking as he pushed them through the sleeves. "You can stay if you want, but we're done here." Lorraine's voice dripped with false concern. "Amelia, are you going to let him take your son? Just walk out like this?" Harry looked at his wife. She was standing now, torn between her mother and her family, her face pale and her eyes wide. He could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. The weighing of loyalties, the same choice she'd been making for 12 years over and over. "Come with us," he said quietly. "Right now, choose your son. Choose your family." Amelia looked at her mother. Looked at Harry. Back to her mother. She didn't move. Harry nodded slowly. Okay, I understand." He took Michael's hand and walked toward the door. Behind them, Lorraine's voice rose sharp and victorious. "You can't leave. We're in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner. This is ridiculous, Harry. You're being absolutely ridiculous." Harry opened the front door. The cold November air rushed in clean and sharp. He guided Michael out onto the porch, then turned back for one last look at the scene inside. Amelia still stood frozen by the table. Heath was red-faced and sputtering. Lorraine sat at the head of the table like a general who'd won a battle, her expression smug and satisfied. And on the table, forgotten by everyone except Harry, sat Michael's paper turkey. The one he'd made with so much care. The one Lorraine had dismissed without a second thought. "Amelia," Harry said one last time, "are you coming?" His wife looked at him. Her mother's hand was on her arm now, holding her in place. When Amelia spoke, her voice was small. "You're tearing this family apart." "No," Harry said. "I'm just finally seeing it for what it really is." He closed the door. The walk to the truck felt surreal. Michael's hand was cold in his, and the boy was shaking, though whether from cold or emotion, Harry couldn't tell. He helped his son into the passenger seat, buckled him in, then walked around to the driver's side. As he pulled out of the driveway, Harry glanced in the rearview mirror. The house stood there, warm and bright and perfectly decorated, with Lorraine Fallon inside, winning another battle in a war Harry hadn't realized he'd been fighting. Michael was crying quietly, not sobbing, just silent tears running down his cheeks. Harry reached over and squeezed his shoulder. "I'm sorry, Dad." The boy whispered. "For what?" "For making you fight with everyone. For making you leave." Harry pulled the truck over onto the shoulder of the road. He put it in park and turned to face his son. "Michael, look at me." The boy raised his tear-stained face. "You didn't do anything wrong. Not one thing. You hear me? But Grandma said, your grandmother is wrong. She's been wrong about you since the day you were born. You're smart and kind and thoughtful. You're everything good in this world. And if she can't see that, that's her failure, not yours. Mom didn't come with us." Harry's chest tightened. "I know, buddy. I know." They sat there on the side of the road as the sun started to sink toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the frozen fields. Other cars passed them. Families heading home from their own Thanksgiving dinners. And Harry wondered how many of them were actually happy. How many were just pretending, just going through the motions, just surviving until the holiday was over. Finally, he pulled back onto the road and drove them home. Their small house looked warm and welcoming after the cold perfection of Lorraine's mansion. Harry unlocked the door and they went inside, and the silence felt like a relief after all the tension and conflict. "You hungry?" Harry asked. Michael shook his head. "Not really." "Me neither." Harry hung up their jackets. "How about we order pizza later and watch whatever movie you want?" A small smile broke through the tears. "Really? Really? It's a holiday. We should do something that actually makes us happy." They settled on the couch together. Harry found an old movie Michael liked. Something with adventure and heroes and clear lines between good and evil. As it played, his son gradually relaxed against him, the tension leaving his small body. But Harry couldn't relax. His mind was racing, replaying the scene at dinner. Amelia's face, Lorraine's smugness, Heath's contempt. But most of all, he kept seeing that cold plate of food, the casual cruelty of it, the message it sent to a child about his worth. And Amelia had just stood there. That was the part that Harry couldn't get past. Not that she defended her mother, not that she'd been angry at him, but that she just stood there and let it happen. Let her mother humiliate their son and then acted like Harry was the problem for finally saying enough. Around 7, his phone started ringing. Amelia he let go to voicemail. It rang again 5 minutes later. He declined a call. Text messages started coming through. Each one escalating in urgency and anger. "How would you just leave like that? You completely humiliated me in front of my family. My mother is devastated. Call me back now. We need to talk about this." Harry turned his phone face down on the coffee table. "Is that Mom?" Michael asked quietly. "Yeah." "Is she mad?" "Yeah." Michael was quiet for a moment, then said, "Is this my fault?" Harry hit pause on the remote and turned to face his son fully. "Michael, I need you to understand something. Adults make their own choices. Your mom chose to stay at your grandmother's house. I chose to bring you home. None of that is your fault. You're a kid. This is grown-up stuff and you don't have to carry the weight of it. But if I hadn't said anything, then nothing would have changed and the cold plate of food would have been just one more thing we all pretended was okay." Harry ran a hand through his hair. Sometimes being quiet and keeping peace isn't actually peaceful. Sometimes it's just letting people hurt you without fighting back. Michael seemed to consider this. Did Grandma hurt you, too? Not just me. The question caught Harry off guard. He'd spent so many years protecting Michael from the truth of it, trying to shield him from the reality of Lorraine's contempt for both of them. But his son was smarter than he'd given him credit for. He saw things, understood things. Yeah, buddy. She did for a long time. Then I'm glad you finally stopped her. Those simple words from his 8-year-old son hit Harry harder than any of Lorraine's barbs ever had. Because Michael was right. He'd finally stopped her. After 12 years of taking it, swallowing it, letting it slide for the sake of family harmony, Harry had finally drawn a line, and his wife had stood on the other side of it. The front door opened around 9:30. Amelia walked in, and Harry could tell immediately that the evening hadn't improved her mood. Her jaw was set, her movements jerky with barely contained anger. She dropped her purse on the entry table hard enough to make it rattle. "Michael, go to your room," she said without preamble. The boy looked at Harry, uncertainty written all over his face. Harry gave him a small nod. "It's okay, buddy. Head up to bed. I'll come tuck you in soon." Michael climbed the stairs slowly, looking back twice before disappearing down the hallway. Harry heard his bedroom door close, then turned to face his wife. Amelia stood in the middle of their living room, her arms crossed tight across her chest. In a soft lamplight, she looked exhausted and furious in equal measure. Her carefully applied makeup from earlier had faded, leaving shadows under her eyes. Her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. "How could you humiliate my family like that?" The words came out sharp and clipped, like she'd been rehearsing them the whole drive home. Harry stood up from the couch, keeping his voice level. "They humiliated our son. That's your version of it." "No, Amelia, that's the truth." Harry stepped closer to her, meeting her eyes directly. "Your mother served Michael a cold plate of food while everyone else ate hot dinner. She did it deliberately. She wanted to send a message to an 8-year-old child that he's worth less than everyone else at that table. She was trying to teach him not to be picky. He wasn't being picky." Harry's volume rose for the first time. He forced himself to lower it again. He didn't complain. He didn't ask for special treatment. Your mother decided completely on her own that he deserved less. And you stood there and let it happen. Amelia's face flushed. "I was trying to keep the peace. Something you clearly don't understand." "Peace at what cost?" Harry gestured upstairs toward where Michael's room was. "At the cost of our son's dignity, his self-worth. How many times are you going to sacrifice him on the altar of your mother's approval? Don't you dare turn this around on me." Amelia's voice was shaking now. "You're the one who created a scene. You're the one who insulted my mother in her own home. You're the one who dragged Michael out of there like some kind of dramatic statement. Someone had to protect him since you clearly weren't going to." The words hung between them, heavy and irrevocable. Amelia's face went pale, then flushed again with anger. "How dare you? How dare you question my love for my son?" "I'm not questioning your love," Harry said, and he meant it. "I'm questioning your judgment, your priorities, the fact that every single time there's a conflict between your mother and your family, you choose her. That is not true. Christmas 3 years ago, she told Michael his handwriting looked like a first grader's. He was 5 years old. He cried for an hour after we left and you told me I was being too sensitive for getting upset about it. She was just trying to help him improve his birthday party last year. She said the cake I made wasn't as good as a bakery cake right in front of all his friends. Made Michael feel like his celebration wasn't good enough. She didn't mean it that way. The science fair. Harry's voice broke slightly when he won first place and she said it was a small school so it didn't really count. Do you remember what he did after that? He asked me not to enter him in the regional competition so there was no point because he probably wasn't that good anyway. Amelia was quiet now, her arms still crossed but her expression uncertain. And today Harry continued today she served him cold food and called it a lesson in gratitude. And Heath backed her up, said Michael needed to be tougher. And you said nothing. I was trying to keep the peace. I know you always are. Harry sat down on the couch, suddenly exhausted. But there's no peace in that house, Amelia. There's just your mother's control and everyone else's compliance. And I'm done complying. Amelia stared at him. In the silence, the refrigerator hummed. The house settled around them with small creaks and groans. Outside, wind rattled the windows, bringing with it the first hints of winter. If you hate my family so much, Amelia said quietly. Maybe you should go. The words landed like a physical blow. Harry looked up at his wife, searching her face for any sign that she didn't mean it, that it was just anger talking, but her expression was set determined. She made her choice just like she always did. You want me to leave? Harry said slowly, making sure he understood. I want you to figure out if you can be part of this family without constantly attacking my mother. I defended our son. That's not attacking. It is to her. It is to me. Amelia's voice rose again. Do you know what she said after you left? She cried. Harry, she actually cried. Said she was trying her best to be a good grandmother and you made her feel like a monster. Harry laughed. A bitter sound with no humor in it. She's crying because for the first time in 12 years, someone stood up to her. That's not being victimized. That's being held accountable. You don't understand her. You've never even tried. I've tried for 12 years, Amelia. I've swallowed every insult, every passive-aggressive comment, every way she's found to make me feel small. I've let her use me for free labor while she talks about me like I'm worthless. I've watched her chip away at our son's confidence while you tell me she means well. Harry stood up again. I understand her perfectly. She's a cruel person who uses love as a weapon and family as a shield, and you become just like her. Amelia's hand flew up and for a second, Harry thought she might actually slap him. But she caught herself, lowered her hand, and instead said the thing that hurt worse than any physical blow could have. Get out, Amelia. I said, get out. Pack a bag. Go stay somewhere else. I can't even look at you right now. Harry stood there, suspended in the moment, trying to find the right words to pull this back from the edge. But looking at his wife's face, at the set of her jaw and the coldness in her eyes, he realized there were no right words. This had been coming for years. Every unspoken resentment, every swallowed argument, every time he had chosen silence over confrontation to keep the peace had just been delaying the inevitable. Okay, he said finally, I'll go. But I'm not leaving Michael here. He's my son. He's our son. And right now, this house isn't safe for him. Amelia's expression hardened. You're being dramatic. Nothing about this house is unsafe. You're telling me to leave because I stood up for our child against your mother's cruelty. If you think that's the right choice, then no. This house isn't safe. Not emotionally. Not for him. You can't just take him. Watch me. Harry climbed the stairs, his heart pounding. At the top, he paused outside Michael's door, collecting himself. Then he knocked softly and pushed it open. Michael was sitting on his bed, still fully dressed, clearly having heard every word of the argument downstairs. His face was pale, and his eyes were red-rimmed. He looked up when Harry entered, and the expression on his face was one no 8-year-old should have. Resignation, weariness, like he'd known this was coming all along. Hey, buddy, Harry said, keeping his voice gentle. Pack some clothes. We're going to stay somewhere else for a few days. Are you and Mom getting divorced? The question was direct, mature beyond his years. Harry came and sat on the edge of the bed. I don't know yet, but right now, we need some space from each other, and I need to make sure you're somewhere that feels safe and good. Grandma's house doesn't feel safe. I know. This house doesn't feel safe anymore either. Harry pulled his son into a hug, feeling the small body shake with silent sobs. I'm going to make sure you're okay. No matter what happens with your mom and me, you're going to be okay. I promise. They packed quickly. A week's worth of clothes, Michael's favorite books, his stuffed bear that he pretended he was too old for, but still slept with every night. Harry grabbed some of his own things from the bedroom, moving efficiently while Amelia stood in the hallway with her arms crossed, watching with an expression he couldn't read. Where are you going? She asked as they headed for the front door. To a motel for tonight. After that, I'll figure it out. This is ridiculous. You're being absolutely ridiculous. Harry turned at the door, Michael's hand in his. No, Amelia. For the first time in 12 years, I'm being a father. That's all I'm being. He guided Michael out into the cold November night. The boy climbed into the truck without complaint, buckled himself in, and stared straight ahead as Harry started the engine. As they pulled out of the driveway, Harry glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Amelia silhouetted in the doorway, her phone already to her ear. He didn't have to guess who she was calling. The Cedar Bluffin' wasn't much, but it was clean and quiet. Harry got them a room with 2 beds and carried their bags inside. The space smelled like industrial cleaner and old carpet, but it was warm and the door locked. And right now, that was enough. Michael sat on one of the beds, looking small and lost. Harry ordered pizza from a place nearby. And while they waited for delivery, he called his sister in Minnesota. She answered on the 3rd ring. Harry, it's almost 11. What's wrong? He gave her the abbreviated version, keeping his voice low so Michael wouldn't hear all the details. When he finished, there was a long pause on the other end. About time. His sister said finally. What? I've been waiting for you to finally stand up to that woman for years. Mom and I talk about it all the time. We could see what she was doing to you. You never said anything. Would you have listened? Harry thought about that. Probably not. Exactly. Sometimes people have to come to realizations on their own. His sister's voice softened. How's Michael? Harry looked at his son, who was flipping through TV channels without really watching any of them. Shaken, sad, but he'll be okay. And you? I don't know yet. Ask me in a few days. They talked for a few more minutes before Harry hung up. The pizza arrived and he and Michael ate it sitting on the motel beds watching some animated movie neither of them really cared about. When Michael finally fell asleep, Harry sat in the chair by the window and stared out at the parking lot. His phone buzzed with texts, some from Amelia, a few from numbers he didn't recognize, probably Lorraine or Heath using different phones. He ignored all of them. Whatever they had to say could wait until morning. Tomorrow, he need to figure out real lodging. He need to call a lawyer. He need to start making the hard decisions that came with separation and possibly divorce. But tonight, he just needed to sit in this quiet motel room and let the reality of it all sink in. He'd broken his marriage. Or maybe it had been broken for years, and he just finally stopped pretending it wasn't. Either way, there was no going back from here. The cold plate of food at Thanksgiving dinner had been the final straw, but the foundation had been crumbling for 12 years. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, Harry finally crawled into bed. Michael had migrated to his bed at some point, curled up against Harry's side like he used to do when he was smaller. Harry put his arm around his son and closed his eyes. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Conflict. The messy reality of untangling a life he'd spent over a decade building. But tonight, his son was safe. That was what mattered. That was all that mattered. 2 days later, Harry sat across from David Shunn, a family attorney whose office was above the hardware store on Main Street. He'd come recommended by a friend from church, someone Harry trusted to point him towards someone competent and honest. David was in his 50s, gray-haired and calm, with the kind of steady presence that put people at ease even in difficult situations. He listened to Harry's story without interrupting, taking occasional notes on a yellow legal pad. When Harry finished, David set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. First question, he said, do you want to save this marriage? Harry had been asking himself that same question for 2 days. I want my wife to choose our son over her mother. I want her to see how toxic her family is. I want her to understand that protecting Michael isn't negotiable. That's not what I asked. I know. Harry rubbed his face. I don't think the marriage can be saved. Not if she won't change, and I don't think she will. David nodded slowly. Then we need to talk about custody. You're currently staying in a motel with your son. That's not sustainable long term. How has Amelia been since you left? She's called 20 times. Left a dozen voicemails. Most of them are angry. Some are trying to negotiate me coming back. She wants me to apologize to her mother. Are you going to? No. Good. Don't. David pulled out a fresh legal pad. Here's what we're going to do. First, you're going to file for legal separation with a request for temporary primary custody that establishes a formal arrangement and protects your position. Second, you're going to start documenting everything. Every interaction with Lorraine, every time Amelia chooses her mother over Michael's well-being, every incident that demonstrates the emotional harm being done. I don't have much documentation so far. Then we start gathering it now. Text messages, voicemails, emails. If Lorraine says something inappropriate, write it down immediately with date and time. If Michael tells you something that happened, write that down, too. David, lean forward. And Harry, I need you to understand something. This is going to get ugly. Lorraine sounds like the type who won't go down without a fight. She'll turn Amelia against you even more. They'll paint you as unstable, aggressive, a bad father. You need to be prepared for that. I am. Are you? David's expression was serious because in my experience, people say they're prepared for ugly divorces, but they're rarely ready for just how personal and vicious it can get. Especially when you're dealing with someone like Lorraine, who has something to lose. What does she have to lose? Control, influence, her image as the perfect grandmother. If you get primary custody and can prove she's been emotionally abusive, that's not something she can spin. That follows her. In a town like Cedar Bluff, reputation matters. Harry thought about that. Lorraine had spent her entire life cultivating an image of perfection. The successful widow, the devoted mother, the doting grandmother. The idea that someone might pull back that curtain and show what was really underneath would be intolerable to her. She'll fight. Harry said she'll fight hard. The question is, are you ready to fight back? Harry thought about Michael sleeping in a motel bed. Thought about the cold plate of food. Thought about 12 years of watching his son's confidence get chipped away piece by piece. Yes, he said. I'm ready. David smiled grimly. Then let's get to work. They spent the next 2 hours going over details. David explained the legal process, the timelines, what to expect from Amelia's response. He gave Harry the name of a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and could potentially provide documentation of the emotional harm Michael had experienced. He helped Harry draft a text to Amelia informing her of his intent to file for separation and requesting that Michael not be left alone with Lorraine during this time. When Harry left the office, he felt steadier. Having a plan helped. Having someone in his corner who understood the legal landscape helped even more. He picked Michael up from school that afternoon. They'd been staying in the motel for 3 days now. And Harry had enrolled Michael in a temporary arrangement where the school knew to release him only to Harry. Michael climbed into the truck with his backpack looking tired. How was school? Okay. Mom came by at lunch. Harry's stomach clenched. What happened? She wanted me to go home with her. I said I wanted to stay with you. She got upset. Michael's voice was small. She said you're being selfish. That you were keeping me from her. I'm not keeping you from her, buddy. You can see her whenever you want. I just don't want you at your grandmother's house right now. I don't want to be there either. Michael looked out the window. Some kids asked why I wasn't at Thanksgiving. I didn't know what to tell them. Harry pulled into a parking lot and turned to face his son. You tell them the truth. You tell them your family is going through some changes, but you're doing okay. Am I doing okay? The question hit Harry hard. I don't know. Are you? Michael was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I feel bad that you and Mom are fighting because of me. But I also feel lighter, like I don't have to worry about Grandma saying something mean or Uncle Heath calling me soft or Mom getting mad when I tell her it hurt my feelings. That's not because of you, Michael. That's because I finally did what I should have done years ago. They sat in the parking lot for a while longer talking through Michael's feelings, his fears, his questions about what came next. Harry didn't have all the answers, but he tried to be honest about what he did know. Yes, things would change. Yes, it would be hard sometimes. But no, none of this was Michael's fault. And yes, Harry would make sure he was okay no matter what. That evening, Harry found a small rental house on the edge of town. It was nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom cottage that belonged to an elderly woman who moved into assisted living. Her son was managing the property and was willing to do a month-to-month lease until Harry figured out something more permanent. They moved in the next day with their meager belongings from the motel. Harry bought some basic furniture from the thrift store and made up Michael's room first, making sure it felt comfortable and safe. His own room could wait. A week after Thanksgiving, he showed up at Harry's repair shop. Harry was under a Ford pickup replacing a transmission mount when he heard boots on the concrete floor. He rolled out from under the truck and found Heath standing there with his arms crossed, face red with anger. We need to talk, Heath said. Harry stood up slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. Do we? You're not welcome in our family anymore. Okay. Heath blinked, clearly expecting more resistance. Did you hear what I said? I heard you and I said, okay. Harry sat down the rag and faced him fully. Your family has made it clear for 12 years that I was never really welcome. I was just useful, someone to do free work and provide grandchildren and be a convenient target for your mother's contempt. So, sure, I'm not welcome. That's fine with me. You're going to apologize to my mom, and you're going to admit you were out of line at Thanksgiving. Harry laughed. It wasn't a kind sound. No, I'm not. Heath stepped closer, tried to use his height as intimidation. He had a few inches on Harry and probably 30 pounds, most of it from beer and his mother's cooking. You don't have the guts to cut us off. Amelia will come to her senses and you'll be back begging to be let back in because you can't survive without us. Yeah, I've been surviving despite you. There's a difference. You think you're so much better than us. I don't think I'm better. I just think I'm done. Harry's voice was calm, but there was finality in it. Done being disrespected. Done watching my son be torn down. Done letting your mother manipulate my wife into choosing between us. I'm just done. You're going to lose everything. Amelia, Michael, your whole life maybe, but I'll still have my dignity, which is more than you can say. Heath's face went from red to purple, his fists clenched at his sides. For a second, Harry thought he might actually throw a punch. Part of him almost wanted him to. It would make everything cleaner, more concrete. But Heath just stood there shaking with rage, unable to follow through. You'll see, Heath said. Finally. Mom always wins. She'll make sure Amelia never forgives you. She'll make sure Michael grows up knowing what kind of person you really are. She'll destroy you. She could try, Harry said. But I'm not the one living in my mother's basement, am I? I'm not the one who needs her money to survive. I'm not the one whose entire identity is wrapped up in being her favorite. That's you, Heath. Then when she's done using me as a scapegoat, she'll turn on you next. That's what people like her do. Heath opened his mouth, closed it, then turned and stormed out. The shop door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Harry's hands were shaking. He sat down on an overturned bucket and took several deep breaths. The confrontation had been inevitable, but it still left him rattled. Not because of Heath's threats, but because of what they represented. The battle lines were drawn now. There was no pretending anymore. No possibility of reconciliation. His phone buzzed. A text from David, his lawyer. Amelia filed her response. She's asking for primary custody and claiming you abandoned the family. We need to meet. Harry stared at the text. So it had begun. The real fight, the kind that happened in courtrooms and mediation offices with lawyers and judges deciding the fate of his family. He texted back. When? Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Bring all your documentation. That night, Harry sat at a small kitchen table with every text message, voicemail, and note he'd compiled over the past week. He'd been documenting everything just like David had advised. Lorraine's manipulative messages to Amelia. Heath's threats, Amelia's own texts that revealed her priorities. But he needed more. He needed proof of the pattern, evidence of years of emotional harm. He pulled out a notebook and started writing down everything he could remember. Dates, incidents, exact words when he could recall them. The Christmas when Lorraine had told Michael his handwriting was terrible. The birthday party where she'd criticized Harry's cake, the science fair, the cold plate of food. By 3 a.m, he had 20 pages of documented incidents spanning their entire marriage. It was exhausting to read seeing it all laid out like that. 12 years of small cuts, careful cruelties, systematic erosion of worth and dignity. He'd let it happen. That was the part that hurt most. He'd known what Lorraine was doing, had felt the impact of it, but he'd chosen peace over confrontation again and again. And in doing so, he'd failed to protect his son. But he was protecting him now. That had to count for something. The next morning, Harry sat across from David in the attorney's office, reviewing Amelia's filing. She claimed he had anger management issues, that he created an unsafe environment at Thanksgiving, that his decision to take Michael and leave without her permission constituted parental kidnapping. None of this is true, Harry said, reading through it. Of course, it's not true, but it's a common strategy. Paint you as unstable and her as the reasonable parent trying to protect her child. David tapped the document. The good news is we have your documentation. We have witnesses to the Thanksgiving incident and we're going to request that the court appoint a guardian ad litem for Michael. What's that? An independent attorney or social worker who represents Michael's best interests. They'll interview him. Interview both parents, interview others involved. Their recommendation carries a lot of weight with judges and custody cases. Will Michael have to testify? Not in court. No. The guardian will talk to him privately, usually multiple times. They'll try to understand his perspective, his feelings, his experiences with both parents and extended family. David leaned back. Harry, I need to ask you something. How far are you willing to go with this? What do you mean? I mean, are you willing to fight for full custody? Are you willing to request supervised visitation only? Are you willing to put restrictions on Amelia's access to Michael if it means protecting him from Lorraine? Harry thought about his son, thought about the relief in Michael's voice when he said he felt lighter. Thought about the promise he'd made on the back porch before Thanksgiving. As far as I need to, he said. Whatever it takes to keep him safe, David nodded. Then that's what we'll do. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of Harry's life. Amelia was fighting him at every turn. Influenced by Lorraine's coaching, she filed motions claiming he was keeping Michael from her. Even though Harry had repeatedly offered to let her see him anywhere except at Lorraine's house, she claimed he was poisoning Michael against her. Even though Harry had been careful to never speak badly about her in front of their son, the town started taking sides. Cedar Bluff was small enough that everyone knew everyone's business and the Rowe-Fallon separation was prime gossip material. Some people sided with Harry having seen or experienced Lorraine's behavior themselves. Others sided with Amelia, seeing Harry as the aggressor who'd ruined a family over a minor disagreement. Harry ignored it all and focused on what mattered, taking care of Michael, running his business, building his case. The guardian ad litem assigned to their case was a woman named Patricia Simmons, a social worker with 30 years of experience in family court. She was in her late 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She interviewed Harry first, asking detailed questions about his relationship with Michael, his concerns about Lorraine, his decision to leave on Thanksgiving. Harry was honest about everything. He showed her his documentation, explained the pattern of behavior, described the co-plate incident in detail. Patricia listened without judgment, taking notes, asking clarifying questions. A week later, she interviewed Michael. Harry drove him to her office and waited in the lobby, trying not to be anxious about what his son might say. Michael was in there for over an hour. When he came out, he looked tired, but okay. Patricia walked him to the lobby and gave Harry a slight nod that might have been reassuring but was hard to interpret. "We'll talk again," she said to Michael. "You did very well today." In the car, Harry asked gently, "How'd it go?" "Okay. She was nice. She asked a lot of questions about Grandma and Mom and you." "What did you tell her?" Michael looked out the window. "The truth. That Grandma makes me feel bad about myself sometimes. That Mom gets upset when I say that. That you always make me feel safe." He turned back to Harry. "Was that okay?" "That was perfect, buddy. The truth is always okay." Patricia also interviewed Amelia, Lorraine, and Heath. Harry wasn't privy to those conversations, but he could imagine how they went. Amelia would present herself as the concerned mother trying to protect her son from an unstable father. Lorraine would be charming and manipulative, playing the victim. Heath would back up whatever his mother said, but Patricia was experienced. She'd seen these dynamics before. Harry had to trust that she'd see through the performance. The mediation session was scheduled for December 15th, 3 weeks after Thanksgiving. Both parties would sit down with a mediator and try to reach an agreement before going court. David advised Harry that this was mostly a formality, that with Lorraine's influence, Amelia was unlikely to compromise. He was right. The mediation took place in a conference room at the county courthouse. Harry sat on one side of the table with David. Amelia sat on the other side with her attorney, a sharp-dressed man named Robert Calloway, who specialized in family law. And beside Amelia, uninvited but present anyway, was Lorraine. The mediator, a patient older man named George, looked uncomfortable with Lorraine's presence, but didn't object. He explained the process, emphasized the importance of keeping Michael's best interests central, and asked each side to present their position. Amelia's attorney went first, painting Harry as an aggressive man with anger management issues who had created a hostile environment at a family gathering and then kidnapped his son. He claimed Amelia was a devoted mother who wanted nothing more than to have her family back together, but she needed assurances that Harry would participate in therapy and family counseling. Then it was David's turn. He presented Harry's documentation, the texts, the voicemails, the written accounts of years of emotional manipulation and harm. He described the cold plate incident in detail with dates and witnesses. He explained that Harry wasn't asking to keep Michael from Amelia, but rather to protect him from Lorraine's toxic influence. And then he played a voicemail that Harry had only recently remembered to retrieve. It was from 3 months earlier when Lorraine had called Harry's phone by mistake while talking to Amelia. She hadn't realized she'd dialed him, and a voicemail had recorded 2 minutes of their conversation. Lorraine's voice came through the speaker, clear and cruel. "I don't know why you settle for him, Amelia. He's never going to amount to anything. He fixes cars for a living. That's not a real career. Michael is going to grow up thinking mediocrity is acceptable if you don't set higher standards." Amelia's voice, quieter but audible. "Harry works hard, Mom. Working hard isn't the same as working smart. And that boy, he's too sensitive, just like his father. You need to toughen them both up or they're both going to be failures." The conference room was silent when the recording ended. Harry watched Amelia's face, saw her go pale, saw Lorraine's smug expression falter for the first time. "This is taken out of context," Lorraine said immediately. David didn't respond to her. He addressed the mediator instead. "This is the environment Mrs. Rowe wants to bring Michael back into, an environment where he and his father are routinely demeaned and belittled. Where a grandmother's love is conditional on meeting her arbitrary standards, where emotional abuse is disguised as helpful advice." George, the mediator, looked at Amelia. "Mrs. Rowe, do you have a response to this?" Amelia glanced at her mother, then at her attorney. When she spoke, her voice was shaky. "My mother didn't mean those things the way they sound." "How did she mean them?" George asked gently. "She was frustrated. She wants the best for Michael." "The best?" David interjected. "She served him cold food while everyone else ate hot meals. She regularly criticizes his achievements. She demeans his father in front of him. That's not wanting the best. That's abuse. How dare you?" Lorraine spoke up, her voice sharp. "I love my grandson. Everything I do is out of love." Harry finally spoke, keeping his voice calm. "Love doesn't humiliate. Love doesn't belittle. Love doesn't serve cold food to a child as a lesson. You poisoned my daughter against me. I presented facts, documented incidents. Your own words recorded on my voicemail. I didn't have to poison anyone against you. Your behavior speaks for itself." Lorraine stood up, face flushed with anger. "I will not sit here and be attacked. Then leave, Harry said simply. This is a mediation between me and my wife. You shouldn't be here anyway. George nodded. Mrs. Fallon, perhaps it will be best if you waited outside. I'm here to support my daughter. Your daughter is an adult with her own attorney. She doesn't need your support in this room. George's tone was firmer now. Please step outside. Lorraine looked at Amelia, clearly expecting her to object, but Amelia just sat there staring at the table and said nothing. Finally, Lorraine gathered her purse with jerky, angry movements and walked out. The door closed behind her with a sharp click. The mediation continued for another hour, but it was clear no agreement would be reached. Amelia's position remained that Harry needed to apologize and submit to family counseling that included Lorraine. Harry's position remained that Michael's well-being was non-negotiable and Lorraine's access to him needed to be restricted. Then we'll see you in court, Amelia's attorney said finally. As they filed out, Harry caught Amelia's arm gently. It doesn't have to be like this. She pulled away. You destroyed our family. No, I protected our son. There's a difference. Her eyes filled with tears. You're so sure you're right. You're so sure you know what's best. But you're tearing everything apart. It was already torn apart. I just finally stopped pretending it wasn't. He watched her walk away, saw her meet her mother in the hallway. Lorraine immediately began talking, no doubt coaching her on what to say, how to feel, what to do next, and Amelia listened, nodding, falling back into old patterns. David touched Harry's shoulder. Court date is set for January 12th. That's when the judge will make a determination on temporary custody pending the final hearing. Will I be able to keep Michael until then? Yes. The current arrangement stays in place. David paused. Harry, that voicemail was powerful evidence. The judge is going to hear that. Patricia will hear it in her investigation. It's going to carry weight. Harry nodded, but he felt no satisfaction, just a deep weariness. This was his life now. Court dates and lawyers and fighting with the woman he'd once loved over the fate of their child. But when he picked Michael up from school that afternoon and saw his son smile, saw how relaxed and happy he'd been these past few weeks away from Lorraine's influence, Harry knew he was doing the right thing, even if it cost him everything else. The courtroom was smaller than Harry had imagined. He'd seen plenty of legal dramas on television, grand spaces with high ceilings and dramatic lighting. This was just a wood-paneled room with fluorescent lights and uncomfortable chairs. The kind of space where ordinary people's lives were decided by judges in black robes who had a dozen other cases to hear that same day. Harry sat at the defendant's table with David, his hands folded on the smooth wood surface. Across the aisle, Amelia sat with her attorney. She didn't look at him. She'd barely looked at him since the mediation. As if by refusing to acknowledge his existence, she could somehow undo everything that had happened. Lorraine sat in the gallery behind Amelia, dressed impeccably in a navy suit that probably cost more than Harry made in a month. She'd styled her hair, applied perfect makeup, curated her image carefully for this appearance. She looked like someone's kind grandmother, not the manipulator she really was. Heath was there, too, slouched in the back row with his arms crossed. Judge Catherine Morrison entered the courtroom and everyone stood. She was a woman in her early 60s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Harry had looked her up online, learned that she'd been a family court judge for 20 years and had a reputation for being fair but tough. She didn't tolerate games or manipulation, and she prioritized children's welfare above all else. Be seated, she said, settling in her chair and opening a thick file. We're here today for the temporary custody hearing in a matter of Roe versus Roe. I've reviewed the filings from both parties, the documentation submitted, and the preliminary report from the guardian admit. She looked up, fixing her gaze first on Amelia's attorney, then on David. I'm going to hear testimony from both parents and then I'll review the guardian's report in more detail before making my determination. Amelia was called to testify first. She took the stand, was sworn in, and settled into the chair with visible nervousness. Her attorney walked her through a series of questions designed to paint her as the stable, reasonable parent. She talked about her love for Michael, her desire to maintain family unity, her concerns about Harry's anger issues. Then David stood to cross-examine. Mrs. Rowe, you claim your husband has anger management issues. Has he ever been physically violent with you? Or Michael? No. But has he ever threatened violence? No. But his behavior at Thanksgiving? We'll get to that. Prior to Thanksgiving, had your husband ever raised his voice to your mother in Michael's presence? Amelia hesitated. Not really. No. Not really. Or no. No. And prior to Thanksgiving, had he ever refused to help your mother when she asked? No. So, for 12 years of marriage, your husband maintained a civil relationship with your mother despite how she treated him. I don't know what you mean. You don't. David picked up a sheet of paper. Let me read you a text message you sent to your husband on August 3rd of this year. I know mom can be difficult sometimes, but please just ignore her comments. It's easier than fighting about it. Does that sound familiar? Amelia's face flushed. Yes, but so you acknowledge that your mother makes comments that require ignoring. That suggests you're aware her behavior can be problematic. She's just old-fashioned. She doesn't mean let's talk about the Thanksgiving incident. Your mother served Michael a cold plate of food while everyone else ate hot meals. Is that accurate? She was trying to teach him not to be wasteful by giving him cold food. It was still good food. Mrs. Rowe, would you eat a cold plate of food while everyone else at the table ate hot meals? Silence. I'll take that as a no. David set down the paper and looked at Amelia directly. Your husband's response to that incident was to place the cold plate in front of her mother and suggest she eat it if it was good enough for an 8-year-old child. Do you see that as an unreasonable response to protect your son? He made a scene. He embarrassed everyone. Did he use profanity? No. Did he raise his voice? Yes. But to what volume? Shouting or speaking firmly? Amelia looked at her attorney, who nodded slightly. Speaking firmly. And then he took your son and left. Did he prevent you from coming with him? He didn't ask me to come. Actually, Mrs. Rowe, there's testimony from a witness that your husband did ask you to come with them, that he asked you to choose your family. Do you remember that? Amelia's eyes filled with tears. I was trying to keep the peace. At what cost? At the cost of your son's dignity. Objection. Amelia's attorney stood. Argumentative. Sustained. Judge Morrison said. Move on, Mr. Chun. David nodded and switched directions. Mrs. Rowe, since your husband left with Michael on Thanksgiving, how many times have you seen your son? Only twice. Harry won't let me see him more often. Is that accurate? Let me read from text messages between you and your husband. David pulled out his phone. November 30th. Your husband wrote, you can see Michael anytime you want. I just asked that it not be at your mother's house. Your response was, that's ridiculous. My mother has a right to see her grandson. He wrote back. Then we can arrange visits somewhere neutral. You never responded. Is that correct? I was upset. December 7th. Your husband wrote again. Michael would like to see you. Can we meet at the park tomorrow? You responded, not without my mother. Is that accurate? Amelia didn't answer. Mrs. Rowe, is it accurate that your husband has offered multiple times to facilitate visits between you and Michael and you refused unless your mother could be present? She's his grandmother. That's not what I asked. Have you refused visits that didn't include your mother? Finally, quietly, yes. So, when you claim your husband won't let you see Michael, that's not entirely accurate, is it? The truth is you won't see him without your mother present. Amelia wiped her eyes. You don't understand. My mother is heartbroken. She needs to see your grandson. And your son? What does he need? He needs his family, including a grandmother who serves him cold food and tells him he's too sensitive. Objection. Amelia's attorney was on his feet again. Withdrawn, David returned to his seat. No further questions. Harry was called next. He took the stand with his heart pounding. But as he settled into the chair and met Judge Morrison's eyes, he felt calmer. This was it. His chance to tell the truth, to present his side, to fight for his son. David asked him to explain the events of Thanksgiving in his own words. Harry did, keeping his voice steady, describing the cold plate, Michael's reaction, his own response, and the decision to leave. Why did you take Michael with you when you left? David asked. Because he wasn't safe there. Not physically unsafe, but emotionally. He was being punished for existing, being told he should be grateful for scraps. I'd watched it happen for years, and I'd promised him I'd protect him if it happened again. So, I did. Do you love your wife? The question caught Harry off guard. He glanced at Amelia, saw her watching him now, finally making eye contact. Yes, he said, but love isn't enough when someone won't protect our child. Love isn't enough when someone chooses their parent over their partner and their son repeatedly. Amelia's attorney cross-examined him, trying to paint him as controlling and aggressive. But Harry stayed calm, answered every question honestly, refused to be rattled. You claim Mrs. Fallon is emotionally abusive, the attorney said. Yet you continue to interact with her for 12 years. Doesn't that suggest you're exaggerating the severity of her behavior? No, Harry said. It suggests I was trying to keep my marriage together. I was trying to maintain peace. But there's a difference between keeping peace and enabling harm. I finally realized I crossed that line. You recorded a private conversation between your wife and her mother. I didn't record anything. Mrs. Fallon called my phone by mistake and left a voicemail. That's not illegal or unethical. It's evidence of how she really talks about me and my son when she thinks no one is listening. The questioning continued for another 30 minutes, but Harry could tell he was holding his ground. He wasn't giving them anything they could use against him. He was just telling the truth, and the truth was on his side. Finally, Judge Morrison called for Patricia Simmons, the guardian ad litem. Patricia took the stand and presented her report. She'd spent weeks investigating, interviewing everyone involved, reviewing documentation. Her conclusion was clear and damning. Your Honor, based on my investigation, I believe Michael's best interests are served by granting temporary primary custody to his father, Mr. Rowe, with supervised visitation from Mrs. Rowe. Amelia gasped audibly. Patricia continued, I've observed a pattern of emotional manipulation and control by Mrs. Lorraine Fallon that has been detrimental to Michael's emotional well-being. Mrs. Rowe has demonstrated an inability or unwillingness to recognize this pattern and protect her son from it. In my conversations with Michael, he expressed feeling safer and happier in his father's care. He described feeling anxious about visits with his grandmother and feeling that his mother dismissed his concerns. What about Mrs. Fallon specifically? Judge Morrison asked. I recommend that Michael not be left alone with Mrs. Fallon at this time. Her behavior toward him has been consistently critical and demeaning. She uses comparison and shame as motivational tools, which is harmful to a child's development. She sees nothing wrong with her approach, which means there's no reason to believe the behavior will change. Behind Amelia, Lorraine stood up. This is outrageous. I demand to speak. Mrs. Fallon, sit down, Judge Morrison said sharply. This is not your case. You are not a party to these proceedings. My grandson, sit down. I'll have you removed from my courtroom. Lorraine sat, her face purple with rage. Judge Morrison turned back to Patricia. And your recommendation for Mrs. Rowe's visitation? I recommend supervised visits initially with the possibility of unsupervised visits once Mrs. RH demonstrates she can maintain appropriate boundaries with her mother. The supervision should be conducted by a neutral third party, not a family member. It was everything Harry had hoped for and more. He saw Amelia crying silently, her attorney writing furiously on his legal pad, saw Lorraine gripping the back of the bench in front of her with white knuckles. Judge Morrison took a 15-minute recess to review all the materials. When she returned, her decision was swift. I'm granting temporary primary physical custody to Mr. Rowe with legal custody remaining joint. Mrs. Rowe will have supervised visitation twice weekly for 2 hours each visit with a neutral supervisor present. Under no circumstances is Michael to be left alone with Mrs. Lorraine Fallon during these visits. If Mrs. Fallon is present, the supervisor must be present. Mrs. Rowe, if you can demonstrate over the next 3 months that you can maintain appropriate boundaries with your mother and prioritize Michael's emotional well-being, we can revisit the supervision requirement. This order will remain in effect until the final custody hearing, which is scheduled for. She checked her calendar, April 16th. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Amelia broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. Lorraine was on her feet again, trying to get to the judge, but the bailiff stopped her. Her voice carried through the courtroom, shrill and desperate. This is insane. He's poisoning my grandson against me. He's manipulating everyone. You can't do this. Mrs. Fallon, I can. And I have. And if you continue to disrupt my courtroom, I'll hold you in contempt. Judge Morrison's voice was ice. The evidence is clear. Your behavior toward your grandson has been inappropriate and harmful. Mr. Rowe isn't manipulating anyone. He's protecting his child. Something, I might add, that you and your daughter should have been doing all along. The judge gathered her files and stood. This court is adjourned. Harry sat in stunned silence. He'd won. Not completely, not permanently, but for now. Michael was safe. The court had seen through Lorraine's performance and recognized the harm she'd been causing. David clapped him on the shoulder. That was about as good an outcome as we could have hoped for. The judge was clear. Patricia's report was strong. Now we just need to make sure Amelia violates none of the conditions. What happens if she does? Then we go back to court and it strengthens your case for the final hearing. David started packing his briefcase. But Harry, I want you to understand something. This isn't over. Lorraine is going to fight back. She's humiliated, angry, and losing control. People like her don't go quietly. I know. Do you? David looked at him seriously because I've seen cases like this get ugly. Really ugly. Allegations of abuse, attempts to manipulate the child, violations of court orders. You need to be vigilant. Document everything. Every visit, every interaction, every attempt they make to undermine the order. Harry nodded. He understood. This was just the beginning of a longer war. As he left the courtroom, he passed Amelia in the hallway. She was surrounded by her mother and brother. Both of them talking at once, Lorraine's voice rising above the others. Harry caught fragments of her rant. Corrupt judge. That guardian was clearly biased. Will appeal. Find a different attorney. This is outrageous. Amelia looked up and met Harry's eyes. For just a moment, he saw something there. Not anger, not hatred, just exhaustion, defeat, the recognition of something broken beyond repair. Then Lorraine pulled her away. Still talking, still plotting, still refusing to accept any responsibility for the situation she'd created. Harry walked out into the cold January afternoon. The sun was bright, reflecting off snow-covered streets, and the air was crisp and clean. He stood on the courthouse steps for a moment, breathing it in. He protected his son. That was what mattered. Whatever came next, whatever Lorraine tried, whatever battles still needed to be fought, he'd stood up and done the right thing. And that had to be enough. The next 3 months passed in a strange sort of routine. Harry and Michael settled into their small rental house, making it into a real home. Harry taught Michael to cook simple meals. They played board games in the evenings. They went to the library every Saturday. Simple things, quiet things. But Michael flourished in the safety and consistency. The supervised visits with Amelia were difficult. They took place at a family services center with a counselor named Mrs. Rodriguez supervising. Amelia came alone to the first few visits and they went well. Michael was happy to see his mother and they played games, talked, even laughed sometimes. But on the 4th visit, Lorraine showed up. She didn't come inside, just waited in the parking lot. But Harry saw her there when he dropped Michael off, and he saw the way Amelia kept glancing toward the window, distracted and anxious. Mrs. Rodriguez noted it in her report. Mrs. Rose's mother's presence in the parking lot created visible stress for both Mrs. Rowe and the child. While no court order was technically violated, the spirit of the supervision arrangement was compromised. The next visit, Lorraine came inside. She stayed in the waiting room, technically separate from the visit, but her presence loomed. Michael became withdrawn and quiet, giving short answers to his mother's questions. Mrs. Rodriguez ended the visit early. I'm going to recommend to the court that Mrs. Fallon not be on the premises during these visits. Her presence, even in a separate area, affects the child's ability to engage with his mother. The visits improved after that, but the damage was done. Michael started to dread them, associating seeing his mother with the anxiety of potentially encountering his grandmother. Harry tried to help him work through it. Even found a child therapist named Dr. Ellen Walsh, who specialized in family dynamics. Michael saw her weekly and slowly he started to understand that his feelings were valid, that it was okay to have complicated emotions about his family. I love Mom, he told Harry one evening. But I don't want to go back to how things were before. You don't have to, Harry assured him. Things will never go back to how they were. Too much has changed. In March, Amelia violated the court order. She picked Michael up for a supervised visit, but drove him to Lorraine's house instead of the family services center. She kept him there for 6 hours, missing the scheduled return time and didn't answer her phone when Harry called. When she finally brought Michael back, the boy was shaking and pale. Lorraine had spent the entire visit telling him that his father had poisoned everyone against her, that she was the real victim, that Harry was destroying their family. Harry called David immediately. They filed an emergency motion the next day. The hearing was brief. Judge Morrison was not pleased. Mrs. Rowe, you violated a direct court order. You took your son to precisely the environment this court determined was harmful to him. You exposed him to the person we specifically said he should not be alone with. Can you explain your reasoning? Amelia, looking smaller and more defeated than Harry had ever seen her, said quietly, my mother was in crisis. She needed to see her grandson. I thought one visit wouldn't hurt. One visit did hurt. According to the therapist's report, Michael had nightmares for 3 nights afterward and regressed emotionally. Your mother used that visit to manipulate him, to try to turn him against his father. That's exactly what this court was trying to prevent. Judge Morrison shook her head. Mrs. Bro, I'm reducing your visitation to once weekly, still supervised, and I'm making it clear that any further violations will result in the complete suspension of your visitation rights pending the final hearing. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Amelia whispered. As they left that hearing, Harry saw Amelia and her mother in the parking lot. Lorraine was berating her daughter, blaming her for not fighting hard enough, for not standing up to the judge, for not being strong enough to protect her family. And Amelia just stood there and took it like she'd been taking it her whole life. Harry almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The final hearing in April was anticlimactic compared to the earlier battles. The evidence was overwhelming. Patricia's final report recommended that Harry maintain primary custody with unsupervised visitation for Amelia, but with strict boundaries around Lorraine's involvement. Judge Morrison's final order was clear. Harry would have primary physical custody. Amelia could have unsupervised visits, but Lorraine could only see Michael during specific supervised periods once per month. Michael would continue therapy to process the family dynamics and trauma. All parties would return to court in 6 months to review the arrangement. The divorce was finalized the same day. 12 years of marriage ended with the stroke of a judge's pen. As Harry walked out of the courthouse for the last time, he felt lighter than he had in years. Not happy exactly, not yet, but free. The weight of Lorraine's expectations, of Amelia's divided loyalties, of pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't, all of it was finally gone. Michael was waiting with Harry's sister, who'd driven down from Minnesota to provide support during the hearing. When he saw Harry, he ran to him, and Harry scooped him up, even though the boy was really getting too big for it. "Is it over?" Michael asked. "Yeah, buddy. It's over. Are we okay?" "We're going to be okay. I promise." That evening, Harry and Michael drove to the north side of Cedar Bluff, where a small cottage sat near the lake. It was the same rental they'd been in, but Harry had signed a long-term lease now and made it officially theirs. They sat on the small porch as the sun set over the water, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. The air was warm, carrying the first hints of real spring. Birds sang in the trees around them. Everything felt quiet and peaceful in a way Harry hadn't experienced in years. "Dad," Michael said after a long comfortable silence. "Yeah. Thank you for what?" "For keeping your promise. For standing up for me. For making sure I was safe." Harry pulled his son close, feeling tears prick his eyes. "I'll always keep that promise, Michael. Always." They sat together until the stars came out, until the lake was dark and still. Until the night settled around them like a blanket. Michael fell asleep against Harry's side, peaceful and safe, and Harry just held him and watched the quiet water. He'd lost his marriage, lost his in-laws, though that was no real loss. Lost the life he'd built over 12 years. But he'd gained something more important. He'd gained back his dignity, his son's safety, his own sense of integrity and purpose. And he'd proven that sometimes loving someone meant setting them free. Setting yourself free. Walking away from people who'd never really valued you in the first place. Harry looked out at the lake at the reflection of stars on dark water and felt something he hadn't felt in over a decade. Peace. The kind you earned by finally standing up for what mattered. The kind you couldn't buy or fake or compromise into existence. The kind that came from knowing you'd done the right thing, even when it cost you everything else. Michael stirred in his sleep, mumbling something about pancakes. Harry smiled. Tomorrow they'd make pancakes. Tomorrow they'd go to the library. Tomorrow they'd live their simple, quiet life free from manipulation and cruelty and conditional love. Tomorrow they'd keep building the life they deserved. But tonight they'd just sit here in the peaceful dark and be grateful for exactly what they had. Each other, safety, freedom, a future filled with possibility instead of pain. Harry closed his eyes and breathed in the cool night air. The wind carried the scent of lake water and pine trees. Somewhere in the distance, a loon called out, its cry echoing across the water. He was home. Finally, truly home. Not in a house or a town or a relationship, but in himself, in the knowledge that he'd fought for what mattered and won, and that was worth more than anything Lorraine Fallon could ever take away.
That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the stories. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.